Okay, Lord Mayor, we're live on YouTube.
Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome to Council meeting 5th of October. Sorry for a slight glitch at the beginning. I hope everyone's now on and can hear okay. If you do have any technical problems, councillors, please put something in the chat and one of the technical support team will get hold of you. So thank you very much and welcome. I hope everyone's staying safe and well at this challenging time. So let's start with public business. Do we have any apologies for absence, Jennifer?
Lord Mayor, I have apologies from councillors Azad, Harris, Haynes and Sim, and Councillor Shaista Aziz will be slightly late. I haven't had anything else.
Do we have any other notifications of absences? Use your raise hand function if you do. I'll take that as a no. So thank you very much. Moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Haven't been previously notified of any, but if people do, you can either put your hand up now, or if you realise during the meeting that you have a declaration you haven't already notified, you can put your hand up at that point. We'll take the declaration then. But if there's anyone wants to declare anything now, fine, nothing. So we'll move on to the minutes. We've got the minutes of the council meeting, the last one held on 20th of July. Does anyone have any questions on those minutes? Any points of accuracy? No, we'll take them as a correct record. Thank you. Appointments to committees. So I hand over to you, Councillor Brown.
Apologies, Lord Mayor, for being slow on the mute button, but thank you for that. We have an appointment to replace on the audit committee, but unfortunately haven't had a chance to discuss that yet in our Labour group. So I would ask Council to allow us to delegate to the head of governance, law and governance to allow us to her in conjunction with our Labour group to make an appointment before the next council.
Okay, that sounds a very sensible solution so we just need council's assent on that. So if anyone has any objections, please raise their blue hand or speak now. Otherwise, we'll assume council is happy to delegate that authority to the head of law and governance. Okay, thank you very much. Move on to announcements, and I will kick off. So thank you, everyone. It's my last council as Lord Mayor. It's been a pleasure to sit here, well, not here, but in various places now in my home with a virtual Lord Mayor's parlour behind me through Brexit, lockdown, climate emergency, and all the various other things that have happened to us, and a rather more eventful year than I'd hoped. But just to report on what I've been doing since the last meeting on 20th July. I have been trying to get involved in the communications around COVID and done several videos and press releases about that, trying to support public messaging coming out from public health. Obviously, we have challenges and in the city, and numbers, I think, we're about to go into red alert. I think that's no secret. Tomorrow the figures will be announced. So we have more challenges ahead. Having said that, there are the city's returning to some form of normality, a new normal. I have been attending far more events. Obviously, the schools are back, and I've been attending some school events online. Various organisations are starting to have their AGMs again. Conferences. I've addressed a conference today and a conference last week with our twin town, Wroxworth. And so there were starting to be in-person meetings. Obviously now, because of the rule of 6, they're no longer happening, but there was a brief period since the last meeting where I did attend various meetings on your behalf. And just to notify that we will be having a sort of a virtual mayor making on the 30th of November. So around the same time as you have in your diary for the next council meeting. So the format of that and the exact timings haven't yet been decided, but if you do get, you will get a notice between now, hopefully sooner rather than later, of any changes or timings to the event on the 30th of November. So thank you for that. With that, I'd like to hand over to the Sheriff, do you have any notices?
Thanks, my Lord Mayor. Comparatively little to report, I'm afraid, in terms of activity, for obvious reasons, since the last council meeting. But like yours, this is my last full council as sheriff in this bizarrely extended year. As you say, in some ways, a rather more eventful year than one would have wished or expected, and in other ways, considerably less so. It sticks in my mind that my last face-to-face event as sheriff was in early March, just a few days before lockdown applied, which in many ways is very sad. But it's been a wonderful year, or year and a half. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a terrible shame about some of the events which would normally take place over the summer but haven't, and colleagues will know exactly what they are. But I wish all the best to my successor, who I'm sure will thoroughly enjoy the position as and when things come back to something a little bit closer to normal. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and just clearly, although I didn't mention it, 30th of November will be sort of a mayor making involving all the civic office holders. So all 3 civic offices will be transformed magically online on the 30th of November. So so I noticed Councillor Tanner's got his blue hand up. Now there's no opportunity invite him to speak unless, Susan, in your announcements you wish to invite Councillor Tanner to speak. It's within your gift to do so.
Lord Mayor, I was hoping to ask you a question. Would that be permissible?
Well, strictly within the Constitution, Susan has to invite you to speak.
Well, I don't want to speak, Lord Mayor. I want to ask you a question on your report.
I'm very happy to give him permission to ask you a question, Lord Mayor.
Right, thank you. Just thought I'd follow procedure. Yes, Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and thank you very much, Craig and Steve, for the excellent work you've been doing as office holders. Could the Lord Mayor give us any information about what the plans are for Remembrance Day in November this year, please?
So we are currently discussing that. I'm going to record a speech of some sort, and we'll arrange some sort of wreath laying, socially distanced wreath laying of some sort, but the details are yet to be decided, whether there is going to be some sort of virtual wreath laying or an actual wreath laying. And I think we'll need to take guidance closer to the time, depending on the circumstances. But there'll certainly be an online speech. I'm recording that shortly. And I'm hoping to involve the Deputy Lord Mayor as well, and possibly also the Sheriff, given it'll probably be the last event that they do. Hopefully that answers your question. And Councillor...
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
And I also have Councillor Altaf Khan, which I think as Deputy you probably can speak. Altaf.
Well, I've been asked by Civic Office to laying the wreath and the recording by 2-3 people, the Lord Lieutenant and other people. Yeah. So the Civic Sergeant did contact me, and I agreed to go and do the wreath laying, which will happen, I think, 20th or something. He did said 20th of October.
Yeah. Yeah, so between us, we'll organise that, Councillor Tanner. Thank you, Councillor Khan. Yeah, so back to Susan for your announcements.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So firstly, may I thank you for your term as Lord Mayor, I have the opportunity to say that at this point in the meeting. And in particular, can I thank you recently for the communications you've been putting out about COVID. I think it's been very important that we all are getting that message across to people that it's important to stay safe. And on which topic, I would like to also take this opportunity to welcome to Oxford our many students. We know that there have been some issues with cases amongst students, but I think it's really important to understand that students are not to blame for this. This is not a blame game, and anyone who is suffering from COVID deserves our sympathy and support. and they will get it. And I hope that students, in spite of this really very strange start to the year, will be able to enjoy their time here in Oxford. They're very welcome in our city. They're a really important part of our city and very important actually for our local economy. So that's my words of welcome and on COVID. But I also have one rather sad announcement to make, Lord Mayor, which is that since we last met, Councillor Martin Rush, who has been an excellent local councillor and also our living wage champion, has very sadly had to stand down because of personal reasons, leaving the city, and is no longer a councillor. In the normal run of things, we would of course have had a by-election, but unfortunately by-elections are not currently able to happen, and that is we were hoping that perhaps that might change, but in fact government has now confirmed that there will be no by-elections before the next lot of local elections. So I think his apologies and mine for the fact that we have no replacement or no possibility of replacement until next May, but also our grateful thanks to Martin, who has been an excellent local councillor and also an excellent living wage campaigner for the city, and he'll be much missed.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'd like to minute our thanks to Martin for his work on living wage in particular, I know, which has touched many sort of councillors' wards and activities within their wards. So thank you, Susan. And also City Rector Anthony Buckley, you wish to say something?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm very aware that in 1962, Marilyn Monroe sang Happy Birthday to President Kennedy, but sadly I do not look or sound like Marilyn Monroe. Maybe on behalf of all of us, could I wish the Lord Mayor a very happy birthday today? And as well as that, just conscious of endings and beginnings, and this the season of harvest, and these whole themes of Thanksgiving and sharing, and maybe especially in uncertain times, that call to be thankful people and sharing people and watching out for those in need, which the City Council, if I may say, continues to lead our city in doing so well. So happy harvest, and my thanks, Lord Mayor, again for all that you have done.
Thank you, Anthony. I'd hope to keep that birthday a secret, but there we are. It doesn't get much better than chairing a council meeting on your birthday. So we move on to, and I believe Chief Executive doesn't have any announcements, but speak now if that's changed.
No, nothing to add.
Thank you. On to item 6, public addresses. We don't believe we have any public addresses or questions relate to matters for decision at this meeting. So we now move on to item 7, land acquisition and project approvals for the development of homes in the HRA, which I believe Councillor Rowley will introduce.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to bring forward this report, which is actually a bit of good news for once, in what must be the most, we just talked about Remembrance Day, and what must be the most difficult period for local governments since there was a war on. We're actually bringing forward new council housing. This report seeks to allocate budget for developing up to 69 new council houses additional to our existing plans. These are across some sites in Littlemore, notably the Northfield Brook Hostel, Northfield Hostel rather, which is surplus to the county's requirements, and a site on Lanham Way, which the County Council are also looking to dispose of, and along with some small sites in City Council ownership. We also propose to upgrade 5 houses that we are already building from intermediate or supposedly affordable rent to actual social rent. So in order to do that, we're asking to council if it approves a revision to the HRA capital budget, £31,647,000, and also a revision to the HRA housing revenue accounts revenue budget for £235,000 for the creation of a new team to bring forward future sites. for social and genuinely affordable housing, and make sure that there is make sure as far as it's within our power that there is no further slippage and that these sites are spotted, brought forward and delivered on time to help deal with the housing crisis in our city. And I think I will shut up there and listen to the points colleagues have to make.
Thank you. We have a few questions. I've noticed people putting their blue hands up, but first just ask for a seconder. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Hollingsworth. And just to remind members who are going to speak that there is a confidential appendix to this item. So be sensitive if you are going to talk anything that's from that confidential appendix. Our head of law and governance will jump in to stop the conversation, because we'll have to go into private session if anything is mentioned from that confidential appendix. So just be sensitive to that. Councillor Gant, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 3 questions which I'll roll together just in the interest of time. The first one is about the relationship of this report, which is very welcome, as Councillor Riley said, to growth deal funding, which is mentioned briefly at one point. But in paragraph 8 of the report, I'm just scrolling through, here we are. It says at the end of paragraph 8, officers may switch this scheme to use retained right to buy receipt subsidy rather than housing and growth deal. Paragraph 14 ends by saying this site could then be included in the scope of the Oxfordshire housing and growth deal. And I was just wondering what the connection between this scheme and the identified problems with grant funding in the growth deal are. That's my first question, the relationship with that particular issue within the growth deal. Second one, paragraphs 29 and 37 refer separately to 2 schemes where original costs have gone up, therefore altering the outcome in terms of the housing being delivered. And I wondered if Councillor Riley had any comments on that. And then finally, I think it is just worth pointing out that we are being asked to delegate spends of over 500k to the chief executive, which is outside the normal process. Obviously there is a good reason for that, but just to make sure that the proper safeguards are in place. Those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Councillor Riley, I've got Councillor Wolf as well, but do you want to answer those questions? And I'll return to Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The last question is the quickest to answer. Yes, in case of the small schemes that are that Councillor Gant mentions, paragraphs 29 and 37. These are small sites. They're essentially infill sites, which are difficult to develop viably, and we have it has been worked out that since OCHL is a commercial vehicle, the council relies to a significant extent on the return that OCHL makes to the council. Therefore, it is best in financial terms in this case for those sites to be developed directly by the HRA through with the addition of the funding that those attract, rather than run the risk to OCHL's return to the council that could be incurred by trying to develop those houses at best very marginal viability. And sorry, pardon me, scrolling through the third question was the use of retained right to buy receipts. The answer to that is simply that if we don't use the retained right to buy receipts within time, we have to give it back to the government, and we don't want to do that. Therefore, any scheme of social housing is one on which we would consider using retained right to buy receipts rather than giving them back to the government, and thereby saving a bit of money from that from what was allocated to that scheme for a future scheme. We have to be, certainly in these circumstances and with the high pressure housing market in Oxford, we have to be flexible, and the report simply acknowledges the need to be flexible and quick on our feet, which is also the reason that we're delegating a higher than normal amount of spend to the discretionary spend to the Chief Exec once Council has agreed the principle of this funding and these developments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to say I very much welcome the reports. This is exactly the sort of housing that we need, sort of development that we need, and it's a far happier use of capital borrowing than investing in commercial property as we were planning to do.
I'm not sure that was a question, but a statement perhaps. Okay, so Councillor Gant, you still have your hand up. Is that just a hangover, or would you like to?
Yes, apologies, I'll take it down.
That's fine. So we need to, if no one else wishes to speak, we'll move to a vote on this. So I think we'll handle it. Jennifer, do you want to just talk us through how you're going to do the voting? We're going to do it with the blue hands and then a follow-up, I presume.
I say unless the Head of Law and Governance has any objection, we'll try this by blue hands, but please bear with me because it changes the order. All those in favour of the recommendations, please
can I
put your
just
hands
come
up.
in there? Just, Lord Mayor, I've had a request via chat for some advice on a declaration of interest right at the last minute. A member lives near the site. I suggest they do have an interest in terms of if they live right beside it. So I haven't had a chance, obviously it's right live, so I haven't had a chance to look at the map or anything, but I would suggest for safety that Councillor Henwood, you don't take part in the vote.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you, and thanks for confirming, Councillor Henwood. So we're just moving to show your blue hand now if you're in support of the proposal. Okay, allow Jennifer to go through.
Okay. When everyone has put their hands up, I will write down those I can't see. And then call on those I can't see in favour. Oh, we're nearly there. Hang on. Right, I have all blue hands up in favour of the proposal, apart from Councillor Henwood, who has been advised to abstain.
Thank you very much. That's unanimously supported. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 8, the quarterly integrated performance report, and I believe that's going to be introduced by Councillor Turner.
Yep, thanks very much indeed, Lord Mayor. So I think the reason this report is coming to Council is around the one recommendation, which was the additional capital funding for the replacement housing management system in paragraph 16. But I think it's useful it's coming anyway. What it does is it gives a snapshot of some of the challenges which we face because of the COVID situation. The exact numbers are in flux, and some of them on the latest projections I've seen have changed quite substantially, but I think it does give an important flavour. So the council has lost significant amounts of rent on its commercial portfolio. I think it's worth highlighting that overwhelmingly our commercial portfolio is something we've had for a long time. So there's sometimes been discussion in the press and even in this chamber, whether virtual or otherwise, about the wisdom of councils turning capital into a revenue stream with commercial property purchases. But overwhelmingly, this is not a new thing. Councils up and down the country for a long time have owned things like shops. And clearly, with the current situation, it's very difficult for many of our tenants to pay rent in the way that they normally would. And it's worth being clear that this is an area the government intends offering no compensation whatsoever. The government's been very good actually at telling those who rent out commercial property to be very understanding, but the government is offering no such compensation to ourselves or other councils who are then affected by a reduced income stream. And I'd add actually we are trying to be as understanding as we can be, considering each premise's individual circumstances. There are of course also other pressures. So for example, in the area of communities, town hall bookings is a very big one, leisure is a big one, some increased costs around homelessness and around telephony, for example. And so, you know, what this shapes up to be is a very significant hit on the council's finances. Fortunately, we're in a position where we can mitigate that. So when I read in the local government press of the crises in some town halls up and down the country, we're not in that position. But the ongoing impacts of this situation, Lord Mayor, are going to be really quite difficult to handle and will require a lot of consideration, I think, as we publish our revised budget and medium-term financial strategy in December. So in terms of capital, the situation is evolving. When this first report first went through, we're talking about a situation, so when it was drafted some 6 weeks ago, and of course we couldn't be sure about the speed at which capital schemes would progress. I think I would regard the update on spend, frankly, as a snapshot rather than a definitive projection for year end. In terms of the housing management software, it's one of those areas which has been affected by the COVID pandemic, and there's also sorry. Yes, some increase in costs, and I believe there are some questions about that which I will be glad to answer, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I have Councillor Rowley down to second. Do you wish to speak now or formally second?
Formally, Lord Mayor.
Great. Well, thank you. I have two people who've put now three to ask questions: Councillor Ros Smith, Councillor Andrew Grant, Councillor Dick Wolf. So Councillor Ros Smith, fire away.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and welcome to your last full council meeting. You have been an excellent Lord Mayor and chair of these meetings, whether they've been virtual or in person. So I'd just like to put my personal thanks to you. Yes, Councillor Turner, I noticed that we obviously noted within the report that we've got two high risk rated as red areas. That's economic growth and balancing delivery of the financial plan. And the report states that the short-term impact can be mitigated through use of balances, but that's obviously just a one-off solution. And I wondered if he could, I note that there's going to be a revised budget in December, but I just wondered if he could give assurances that this council will not have to resort to making more cuts, substantial cuts to services and capital cuts, in lieu of having to issue a section notice 114.
Lord Mayor, do you want me to take a few, or shall I deal with that one now?
No, if you could answer that one now, I think we'll move through individually.
Sure. So what the councillor says about the report is right, and we will have to look at our position when we redraft the MTFS. I clearly couldn't give an assurance that there won't be any reductions in our spend, because I think we're looking at an ongoing pressure of several £million a year. We've worked extremely hard to deliver savings, and our savings have overwhelmingly been about efficiency, so not about affecting the service received by people at the front end. And of course, within that, we focus particularly on our services for the most vulnerable. You know, that being the context, suddenly needing to come along and find several £million a year of additional savings is going to be difficult. But the councillor can be assured that when we put forward our consultation budget, it will, as best we can, reflect our values and that focus. Just on Section 114 notices, Mr. Kennedy, our Chief Financial Officer, is not, I think, looking at a Section 114 notice at the moment or anything like that. Our position in terms of balances is okay. The way I see this working is that the one-off costs around COVID are things that by and large we will be able to cover off using balances. But the ongoing hit is something which we won't be able to do clearly, and therefore we'll need to look at our income and also our outgoings.
Thank you, Councillor Turner, and now I have Councillor Gant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is about paragraph 16, the bullet point number 5 under the housing management system, which Councillor Turner referred to. There is a forecast overspend, which is considerable on an original budget of 1.6 million, an overspend of over 400,000, taking it over 2 million. Where this report appears elsewhere in our agenda, in other words, in the cabinet minutes, there is a reference to a possible arrangement, I think the word compensation is used, with the supplier, and I wonder if you could update us about that. And secondly, it says the go live is now planned for September 2020. Has it taken place?
Councillor Turner, would you like to address those?
Yeah, gladly. So on the question of compensation, our officers advise that that matter is going to be best pursued with the person providing this, or with the company providing this, when we've gone live. But they're aware that this is an issue that we will be raising with them, and I think I could provide, if we need a further a fuller statement about that, Lord Mayor, we may need to go into confidential session, but I hope the councillor gets my drift. On the second point about going live, we haven't unfortunately gone live yet. As I understand it, there have been some challenges around the interface, further challenges around the interface of the two systems, and officers are hoping to bring forward a go live date this month, and certainly as soon as we possibly can. That's what I'm informed.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for the report. It really spells it out, which we perhaps haven't seen to now. So that's really helpful. Thank you. I wouldn't pretend to be any kind of financial expert, but it seems to me that quite a lot of our huge and significant losses, which are not going to be covered remotely by anything that we're getting from central government, are effectively dead losses. They're just dead losses. And I'm wondering whether there's any way that they can be capitalized, so that they can be addressed through borrowing, perhaps, to deal with them. So, you know, obviously it might not apply to all particular losses, and it might create work to do that. But I'm just wondering whether that's one possibility. The other one, you know, we're often being told that Oxford and Oxfordshire are our net contributor to the Treasury. You know, they much appreciate our contributions. Our main contributions, I think, are our business rates. Is there any energy or possibility of asking government to allow a smaller contribution to the Treasury from our business rates income to compensate? That's the second question. Third one is a small one, really relates to East Oxford Community Centre. I'm a bit out of touch with that, and it talks about it achieving RIBA stage 4 accreditation last month. I'm just wondering whether you know whether that's actually happened. My fourth question was on the overrun budget, which Councillor Gant has already addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Turner, 3 questions there.
There were 3, but on one of them I'll need to defer to Marie Tidball, I think, regarding East Oxford Community Centre, because I don't know. So on capitalisation, it makes a very good point, and it's certainly an area where we've been engaged in lobbying through the District Treasurers Society. What I understand is that Croydon put forward a formal request in the same vein, and unfortunately were knocked back by MHCLG just earlier this week. That's my understanding. There was a little bit of coverage in the trade press of their request, and our association with it. I find that very hard to understand, because to me it's almost a painless accounting tool for the government to enable local authorities better to meet the challenges. So it's not like saying to government, please may we get more funding, although frankly we should do. And frankly, I find it incredibly disappointing that the government said at the start, we'll look after you, we've got your back, spend what you need to, and is now running away from that responsibility. I find that very disheartening and disappointing. But this would really be a quick win, so I don't understand why that's been refused. And for what it's worth, I did actually drop a line to my counterpart in Croydon and say, had they got any feedback, and was there anything to be done together on the capitalisation issue? So they're certainly one to watch. In terms of business rates, it's an interesting one. I mean, we expected a business rates reset next year. I'm not sure whether that will be happening or not. If it doesn't happen, that would be to our advantage. That view is not shared across local government, because for some where business rates have gone down rather than up, that would be they want a reset. But there would be some logic in the government postponing it, since it seems like the comprehensive spending review is going to be postponed. Similar point actually about fairer funding. I mean, you know, ultimately, and taking a step back, this is all public money. Whatever technical mechanism the government uses to compensate local authorities can be debated, but and it would be sensible for them in any case to agree capitalisation. But really, they need to take a judgment about whether they're going to stand by local authorities in trying to carry on delivering services after we've had these financial pressures which have come out of the blue and we're completely beyond our control, and where certainly in the case of this council we've been absolutely exemplary, I would say, in serving our communities as best we can with our wonderful workforce at this time of need. And that's a judgment the government will have to take, whether it's business rates, whether it's additional grants, you know, who knows, but they really ought to stand up, I think, to their responsibilities.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. And Councillor Tidball, you are able to answer the question around the East Oxford Community Centre.
Yes, I am. Just to say, it's actually, I think he means REBA stage 3, which we haven't reached that stage yet, and plans have been submitted.
Thank you very much for jumping in there to answer that. So we do need to vote on this item. I don't have anyone else wishing to speak. And we're just voting on the Cabinet recommendation to Council on the increase in the capital budget related to the replacement housing management system, which Councillor Turner addressed towards the end. I just had people shooting their hands up before we said to vote, which is very sort of good of you, but if you could take them down, it gets confusing, because I think people want to end up wanting to, the last minute flurry of people wanting to speak. So Jennifer, do you want to do the voting?
If people could raise their hands if they are in favour of agreeing the recommendations, please. I'll just give people a minute to put their hands up. Okay, and everyone has put their hand up apart from Councillor Henwood. Councillor Henwood, could I just check if you're voting for, against or abstaining on this one?
I'm voting in favour. I don't have a blue hand, so I've raised my hand.
In favour, right. Apologies, you're not on my main screen.
Yeah,
and
no, Councillor Henwood, thank you very much.
Councillor, please don't take your hands down yet. That is everybody in favour, so that's unanimous. Okay, thank you.
You can now lower the hands, or one of the officers will do it all for us. Thank you very much. On that, we now move on to item 9, which is approval of contract award for revenues and benefits, and I believe Councillor Chapman is going to be proposing.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I hope you can hear me fine. This is a very timely proposal, because I think it's fair to say that many more people will need to get in touch with us in the next 12 months, in particular in the light of COVID, in relation to housing benefit, their hope to get council tax reductions, and not the many businesses that interface with us, and the many citizens who pay their council tax. So it's absolutely critical that we have a functioning, modern and accessible IT system that can help us process those claims as fast as possible. And the paper makes clear that we've been out to a procurement process, and we have decided to award the contract to Civica, which is a major company in this field, to enable us to have a new and better system. We didn't really have the option to stay with Capita because they did not bid in the procurement process. And in fact, their system, which is called Academy, is pretty obsolete now and is pretty slow and doesn't have the functionality that we need. So this paper basically explains the background to that process. It explains the benefits that will accrue from it, both in terms of the users, the staff, and some of the financial savings that are at the heart of it. It's good value for money. It pays back within 4 years. And it can also be afforded within the capital program at the moment. So on all those grounds, it's a very good thing to do. It's time we did it, and I hope it will have your full support. And strictly speaking, we are asking council to agree the spend and to note the savings that run through the next few years, some of which start in the next financial year around administrative processes, and then further savings around staff starting in 22, 23 and onwards. So I'm happy to answer any questions there may be about it.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I have Councillor Brown second. You was formally second, or?
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf, you have a question.
I do, Lord Mayor. I've actually got 4 in order of priority. First one, could Councillor Chapman give a bit of assurance on those people that don't have internet access? I mean, a lot of my working life until I retired was with people over 70 and over 80, a lot of them. And, you know, there's no mention of that in the report. I mean, just to have some assurance that they're not going to be left on the wayside by a move towards online working. That's the first one. Second one also relates to people's access to the system. And that is that increasingly our staff are working from home. Do we know that the system's robust for home workers, and whether that's been tested? Thirdly, elsewhere in the report, I love this phrase, optimism bias. There's a phrase in the cabinet minutes elsewhere it talks about contingency. And given the story of another IT overrun, I'm just wondering what optimism bias has been included in the risk assessment. And my fourth question is just checking something, and I'm sure the answer is simple to this, but like to be assured again on this one. There's a reference in paragraph 16 to cross-sharing of information about people's debts. And I just want to be sure that what we're talking about here is debts which are to the City Council or managed by the City Council. In other words, we're not breaking firewalls and sharing information about people's debts outside our own systems. I'd just like assurance on that.
Yeah, Councillor Chapman, if you'd like to answer. I don't have anyone at this point.
Let's take them in the order in which they were asked. Yeah, clearly, it's absolutely taken for granted not everybody uses the internet to apply and engage with us on benefits and revenue issues. That's why we have to face customer contact. We have telephone contact, both of which score very, very highly in terms of customer satisfaction. So those services will continue. So if people can't, use the internet, they're struggling with it, then there are alternative ways in which they can discuss with staff their needs, and then the staff can input the data for them. Secondly, one of the successes actually of the last 6 or 7 months has been the robustness of working from home. And there have been very, very few problems. I think the IT team have done a brilliant job. And I'm very confident that the system will work, whether we are working from home or from the office. It will be tested and trialed substantially, obviously, before it goes live in the spring. Optimization bias is not a phrase I personally am familiar with, but what I can say to you is that there is a contingency in the budget here of about 115,000, and were it to be spent, the payback would still be within 4 years. That's pretty good value for money. So I'm pretty confident about that. And finally, on debt management, absolutely. I mean, this is about a holistic view of the debts and the issues that council taxpayers and businesses have with the council. Let me be absolutely explicit about that. Council Wolf, it's not a sort of trawl around everybody else's debts on their credit cards or anything else. That's not what this system is about. But having a holistic view will make it easier for us to work with people to support them in reducing their debt. Obviously, when you have information in lots of different places, that's a slow process. It's not very convenient, and it doesn't help us act as swiftly as we can to support people who, as I said right at the beginning, will need our services more than ever in the years ahead and the months ahead. And there is likely to be greater debt in the city as a result of COVID. So we want to be in a position to absolutely support them as slickly and professionally as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman. I don't have anyone else wishing to ask questions, so we'll move to a vote. And as Councillor Chapman mentioned, we're actually voting on the changes to the budget allocation. So let's make the budget allocation of 735,000 within the council's capital programme. So people are jumping the gun again and put their hands up. So I'm going to hand to Jennifer. Would you like to do the votes?
Could all of those in favour of the recommendations please put their hands up? Okay, so the current tally is 41. And can I just check with Councillor Henwood how he wishes to vote?
In favour.
In favour. So I make that all 42 councillors present voting in favour.
Thank you very much. You can now lower your hand, and we'll move on to item 10, which is decisions taken under point 9.3 of the Constitution. And this is a report for noting, but I believe Councillor Rowley is going to be introducing it.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes. Formally, in formal terms, this was a decision by the Chief Executive taken under the urgency of the urgent powers in our Constitution. In fact, it was a decision that I made in the in consultation with the Director for Housing and with the approval of Cabinet and the Chair of Scrutiny. Thank you very much. This is about the bringing forward of Canterbury House as accommodation for homeless people. Normally, Canterbury House would be a block of student accommodation, but for obvious reasons, Brookes University have found that their need for student accommodation is somewhat less this year than it would normally be. Therefore, Brookes and A2 Dominion have decided to offer it to us when we were searching actively for safe accommodation for homeless people and rough sleepers. So thank you very much to A2D and to Brookes for their cooperation. It provides 76 rooms where comfortable rooms where in a virtually brand new block where homeless people can safely self-isolate. So it's a safe alternative to the winter provision that would normally be provided by the council through its partners and also by the local churches. So this decision, it's unfortunate that it had to be taken using the urgent process and indeed with a retrospective planning application. But unfortunately, we were left with only a few weeks before over 100 people in guest houses would have had to move out. And it was a humanitarian necessity to provide this accommodation, as it will continue to be a necessity to provide it over the winter and to have something in place for and there are spare spaces still, to have something in place for if there is an upsurge in evictions, thanks to the government's unhelpful and indeed inhumane decision not to take forward their promised scrapping of no-fault evictions, but to allow them still to happen despite coronavirus and the arrears that people will unavoidably have built up. So it was essential, therefore, to make the urgent decision make the urgent decision to commission Canterbury House in the light of the situation, and I hope this is actually simply for noting, but I'm grateful for the support of colleagues across party lines, and I hope that this is generally approved. Thank you.
That's time. I have Councillor Gotch wishing to ask a question. Councillor Gotch, we can't hear you if you're trying to speak.
I think it's a legacy hand.
Councillor Gotch, hand's gone down now, so I think you're probably right. It was a legacy hand. So this is a report for noting. I have no one asking to do that, so I'll take it that people are happy with it. It's just for noting, no vote necessary. So thank you, Councillor Rowley, for introducing that, and thank you. I think everyone agrees with the necessity of that quick, rapid decision under emergency powers. We're now moving to item 11, which is the extension of the Chief Executive's fixed term contract. So rather unusually, we can't ask the Chief Executive to leave the room. We can ask him to leave the virtual room. And so we'll be asking the Chief Executive to kindly leave the Zoom call whilst we discuss the extension. So I think we have Susan Brown be proposing this item.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's quite a sort of odd situation to be in all round. In some ways, this is a sort of technical report. It involves a contract, but of course, contracts involving human beings and their employment are very different. And so it is a rather different kind of paper. At some point, I will want to make a proper tribute to Gordon and the fantastic job he's been doing and continues to do for us. But this is not the right time for doing that, because Gordon is not leaving us. And the whole purpose of this report is to, in fact, extend his contract until we get to the point where we have appointed a permanent replacement. It was always envisaged that Gordon's appointment would be as an interim and to take us through a period of change to the point at which we would be appointing a permanent chief executive. And essentially that is what this report sets out for us. So really, I have very little else to say at this point other than to commend this report to Council as an important step in making for our Council's future.
Thank you. And as it says in the report, Appointments Committee have reviewed this and recommending Council to extend the fixed term contract. So we will need to take a vote on it. I need a seconder. I have Councillor Gant down to second. Do you wish to formally second or second?
I'm happy to formally second. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We have Councillor Landor Mills wishing to speak. Tom, are you there? Councillor Landor Mills, we can't hear you if you are speaking.
Yes, sorry, I just needed to unmute myself. I was just wondering whether it's long enough for we'll be back sort of extending the contract further shortly.
We did discuss the correct period for extension, and this feels like the right period to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I have no one else wishing to speak, so we can now move to a vote on this. Jennifer, would you like to coordinate the voting?
Yes, all those in favour of the recommendation of the Appointments Committee, please raise your hands. I'm getting extremely slick at this tonight. I have 42 in support, and we just check, including Councillor Henwood, so that is everybody. No one has no hand up.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's again another unanimous decision. So we're moving on to item 12, questions on cabinet minutes. I should just say that I'm planning to have a break around about 7 o'clock. Depends where we get to around that, and whether or not we've had public speaking. Probably we'll take the break after public speaking, assuming we get to that by 7. Looks like at the moment we will. So we're moving on to item 12 now. Questions on cabinet minutes. So we only have 15 minutes for this item and 2 sets of minutes to go through. So just I'll mention the minutes, and if anyone has anything to say on 12A, which is the minutes of the meeting Wednesday 12th of August, please show your hand. I've got Councillor Gant.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Yes, paragraph 44, which is on page 83 of the main agenda. This is when the report that we've just looked at came to Cabinet, which is quite a while ago now, back in the beginning of August. And this paragraph refers to government funding streams as they were at the time, and how councils will be expected to deal with income losses. And it uses the phrase, councils will be expected to absorb losses up to 5% with the balance compensated at the level of 75%. Eligibility for this has yet to be finalised. I was wondering if there was any update about the details of that, or indeed anything further on government support for council losses.
Councillor Turner, are you going to answer that question?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I will. So the way it's being done is we submit a return to MHCLG and through Nigel Kennedy. He has to review the losses and sort of satisfy himself that they're related to COVID. We're clear that, for example, commercial property income can't be included. We've already talked about that, but many other losses can. And I think we will be receiving a sum of the order roughly of £3 million. So, and you know, the latest figure I've seen is around £12 million as a level of loss in total. So those roughly are where the figures stand on that particular stream of government funding. The councillor might be, well, he probably won't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't, but apparently the government system crashed so that we couldn't upload our return last week. But you know, apparently it's going to be up and running soon because they're being uploaded on a month-by-month basis. I mean, more than that, I've seen recently in the press, as others might have done, that we'll have a little bit of extra money coming forward. I think around some of the enforcement work, but really it's you know, very sort of modest dribs and drabs for specific work streams of the order of 5 figures that is now coming forward. So clearly the government is expecting us to bear the brunt of the loss from our own resources very aggressively.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. The government seems to be having a bit of problem with IT at the moment, track and trace included. So we'll no, I've got no other people wishing to speak on the 12th of August cabinet minutes. Move to the 9th of September cabinet minutes. Councillor Wolf, Councillor Wade. So Councillor Wolf, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's a brief question about item 56, which is about infrastructure for Oxford North, which I see there, by the report that I see there, this was going to be funding from the government's Housing Infrastructure Fund. I'm just wondering whether the City Council is exposed in any way to having to cough up for infrastructure on Oxford North, because I would find that quite difficult, I think.
No.
So no, that's a brief answer from Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you. So Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is another question on paragraph 56, probably for Councillor Hollingsworth again. Can you as the Cabinet member confirm that if TWO doesn't have to repay the 10 million that we are delivering to them of this HIF money, quite a substantial sum of money, then that 10 million will be taken into account when we're looking at the viability of the Oxford North project at a later stage, so that we can estimate whether there should be an increase in the percentage of affordable housing. Currently, this is only 35%, but we obviously want to raise that if we can. And it appears that we are providing TWO St John's with £10 million up front. Are we absolutely sure that this isn't going to get lost somewhere in the equation? Thank you.
Councillor Horns, are you going to respond to that?
Yeah, it won't be quite as short as the last answer, I'm afraid. And Councillor Wade is addressing a very important and very complex series of interactions. It's probably best explained with sort of a quick history sequence of events. When we first obtained the HIF funding for the Oxford North development, it was long before the planning application was submitted. And at that point, the base assumption was that Homes England would provide the £10 million, that the social housing figure was 25%, which was the Homes England assumption rather than anybody else's, and that the grant would be repaid because that was the terms of Homes England's scheme. As you know, the eventual decision that the Planning Committee took was for a 35% affordable housing scheme, which assumed that the grant would not be repaid. So what we have at the moment is an ongoing discussion with Homes England, whereby we would very much like it not to be repaid to Homes England, but essentially to be used as it is currently used in the viability assessment to support affordable housing. Because as you rightly point out, if Thomas White Oxford, otherwise known as St John's College, have to repay it to Homes England, that makes it harder for us to extract additional social housing when we come to the revised viability assessments, which were agreed as part of the planning process. So we're trying to do two things here. One is to ensure that Homes England leave the £10 million in the scheme, because that will improve the viability. And then having done that, look to revisit the figures as laid out in the process agreed as part of the planning permission, to go back and increase it further from the 35% it currently sits at.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Thank you for that answer. I still have Councillor Wolf and Councillor Wade's hands up. I take it those are hangovers from previously. Right, thank you. So that's all the questions people wish to ask on the cabinet minutes. So we'll move to item 13, which is questions on notice from members of the council. We have 40 questions on notice, and I'll go through those, and if people have supplementaries they can say well, I think they can speak because they don't have to raise your blue hand. Hopefully it'll be rather quicker to unmute than to raise your blue hand. So we have question 1, Councillor Wolf to Councillor Rowley, rough sleeping rise. Do you have any supplementaries?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, you caught me on the hop. I was expecting outside organisations report. Just bear with me.
No, I think we're on item 13. Yeah, that's number 15 is outside organisations.
I see. Okay. No supplementary, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Question 2, Councillor Wolf to Councillor Rowley on the rough sleeping count.
No supplementary. Thank you very much.
Okay. We have Councillor Wade to Councillor Chapman, repairs to Queen Street.
Yeah, I have a supplementary, Lord Mayor. I'd like to ask Councillor Chapman whether the city will have any input into the county's decision about when the highway adoption will be signed off, because that's obviously crucial that it should not be signed off until we're certain that we've got a safe and long-lasting highway here, which we don't seem to have at the moment. Thank you.
I think that's a good question, Councillor Wade. I mean, my supposition here is that we wouldn't accept the responsibility under the agreement we have with the county to do work and to maintain the roads going forward if we were not happy with the state of them and when we inherit them. So in that sense, we will have input. But at the end of the day, it is the Highway Authority which is responsible for adoptions. but they can't make us do maintenance on things that we don't want to do maintenance on. So I think there will be a constructive dialogue about that to make sure that everyone's happy with the quality of the work, and then we can go forward and have ODS do some excellent maintenance in the years ahead.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. We have question 4 from me to Councillor Turner. I have no supplementary. Question 5 from Councillor Ross-Smith to Councillor Turner, City car park business rate costs.
No supplementary. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Question 6 from Councillor Gant to Councillor Hayes, Natural Capital Initiative. Do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Question 7, Councillor Gant to Councillor Hayes, Tranche 2 transport schemes.
Yes, I do have a supplementary about this one, please. Thank you for the answer, which is very clear, not to say forthright. It does at first sight appear perhaps less than ideal that City Council members nor officers were not involved in the development or drafting and signing of the Tranche 2 bid. So my question is really the obvious one. Would the Cabinet member have preferred that they were?
Thanks, Councillor Gann. The short answer to your question is yes, and we've made that point repeatedly to Councillor Constance in our fortnightly meetings with her, and we've also written to her formally to make that point very clearly. The response that comes from Councillor Constance is one which is understandable. She says that given the very tight government timelines which are provided to the Transport Authority, they've had very little time to develop and prepare a bid and to take significant input from the City Council. I don't think that's a sufficient reason not to include the City Council, but I do appreciate that they were under very tight timescales.
Thank you.
And Councillor Gant has frozen.
Yeah, so question 8 from me to Councillor Hayes.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, hello. That was a bit jumpy there, whoever was speaking. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So my question, Councillor Simmons, to Councillor Hayes, Tranche 2 active travel grant bid. I will try and frame this as a question, supplementary question. I take it you now have a copy of the Tranche 2 bid. If not, I've got one now.
Kind observer, Councillor Simmons. I do have a copy of the bid.
Thank you. Released under FOI request. So we have question 9, Councillor Henwood to Councillor Hayes, low traffic neighbourhoods in Cowley. Do you have a supplementary at all,
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. And question 10 from you to Councillor Hayes as well, low traffic neighbourhood consultation. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord.
Thank you. And question 11 from me to Councillor Hayes. I have no supplementary. Another one from me to Councillor Hayes on electric cars. I have no supplementary. Thank you for your answer. And question 13, Councillor Gant, Councillor Hayes, Westgate parking pricing. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. I'll keep my camera off to hope that the bandwidth performs a little bit better. Yes, thank you very much for the answer. This compares banding prices at Worcester Street car park with Westgate. It says in the last paragraph of the answer that whilst there is a price differential on longer stay, the short stay tariffs are more comparable, saying that the charge for up to an hour is £1 higher at Worcester Street. I think it's worth putting that into context that the two charges are £3 and £4. So although that is £1, it is 25%. 1 to 2 hours during the day, £6 at Worcester Street, £4 at Westgate. 2 to 3 hours during the day, £9 at Worcester Street.
Question,
£5. Yes, it is, which is getting on 50%. So my question is around the meaning of the agreement that they must have regard to Worcester Street car park, and what, if anything, the council can and does do to make sure that they do.
Thanks, Councillor Gann. I think I'd refer you back to the body of the answer I gave, which is to say that we do routinely have meetings with the Westgate Alliance on various issues, and particularly on car parking at least once a year. And the annual review is coming up in January, which is not very far away. So we'll be making the points that you're raising with us to them there.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf to Councillor Hayes, question 14, car-free day. Do you have a supplementary?
I don't, Lord Mayor, no, thank you.
And question 15, Councillor Wolf to Councillor Hayes on George Street pedestrianisation. Do you have
Yes, just a very brief one. Could the reports, could it be made available to councillors and or the public, and will it be? Because I'd be really interested to know.
It can do. I actually can give him an insight into some of the figures if that's helpful now. So for George Street, we so far had 1,000 people responding to the survey, 83% of whom expressed support for the reinstatement of the pedestrianisation in the warmer months, and 74% of whom saying they would be more supportive of bus gates in the city centre if they had known or knew that it would lead to more pedestrianisation in Oxford city centre. So obviously the hospitality sector, who have written to us separately, are very pleased about the pilot in George Street. We've got a really positive response from customers and users of the street while it's pedestrianised, and also having a living lab, a living reality of what a pedestrianised city centre could look like, has led some people to be more supportive of transportation changes too.
Thank you for sharing that information, Councillor Hayes. I'm sure it'll be very interesting to all pedestrianisation watchers. Question 16, Councillor Wolf, Councillor Hayes, on e-scooters. Do you have a supplementary?
To say about e-scooters, but no supplementary.
Great. Okay, Councillor Wade to Councillor Hayes, Aristotle Bridge repairs. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a brief supplementary. I'm sure Councillor Hayes shares my frustration about this, that there's been no move forward for months on this bridge. Would it be possible for our officers to write to Councillor Constance to find out whether an inspection has happened and whether they are actually liaising with Network Rail, or whether this is something that's been pushed forward? It's a serious problem that anybody trying to walk down that ramp is very well aware of at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to say that in the last few days, I have in fact written to Councillor Constance, and as soon as I get a response, I'll share that with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question 18, Councillor Wade to Councillor Linda Smith, signs in Cutteslowe Park. Do you have a supplementary, Dawn?
No supplementary, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Question 19 from me to Councillor Smith on tree planting activity. Just to let you know, Councillor Smith, I did have an email from a resident that passed on an email from an officer which said that they were pausing tree planting. I will certainly provide that to you, and I guess that's of interest to you. That's the question bit. That's my supplementary.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look forward to receiving that and looking into it.
Thank you. Councillor Goddard to Councillor Linda Smith, verge cutting. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thanks, my Lord Mayor. Just very briefly, hopefully this is one of those questions which the answer is yes, but the councillor refers to hopefully including changes to the grass cutting regime in the budget. I'm hoping, and is this in fact the case, that it'll be possible to fit in those changes, if there are any, before the next major growing season. What would be unfortunate, of course, is if grass cutting were to continue at the current level and were to affect the growing season adversely next year. I'm guessing, given the timing of the budget in kind of early spring, that the answer is probably going to be yes, but basically just checking.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for that. So we're halfway through. Answers like that will get us through all them more quickly. Question 21, Councillor Wade to Councillor Linda Smith, Cutteslowe Park cricket nets. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Question 22, Councillor Wade to Linda Smith on Port Meadow clean-up costs. Do you have a supplementary?
I do have a supplementary, but I would like to join Councillor Smith and in thanking the staff led by Julian Cooper, who have been extraordinary in the way that they have, in the amount of work that they've done, way beyond what could be expected. 8 o'clock at night, I've had phone calls from Julian Cooper on the meadow sorting things out. It's been a tremendous operation. My question is, do we have a plan for the autumn and the winter? People will still be out there. We'll still need the bins emptied, and I'm concerned that we do have a plan and that it's not left up to individual officers to have to police it without all the support that we can possibly give them. Thank you.
I think we do have a plan, but it's
you know, we are back to business as normal. The extraordinary effort that we saw over the summer was a response to specific circumstances. The multi-agency working, which we initiated, you know, was deemed to be successful by people that took part. You know, we were working with the police, with bringing together parts of the council that hadn't previously worked together, and so we will be reconvening in the spring to really make sure we stay on top of things, you know, during next summer when they start to get busy again. And if I could just commend the Facebook group of the Wolvercote and Walton Well Wombles. If anyone hasn't joined that, it's a great initiative set up by officers to coordinate volunteer activity and you know, public interest in Port Meadow. So thoroughly recommend it, and it's a great initiative, and well done to all the staff who worked really hard this summer.
Thank you very much. Question 22, Councillor Henwood to Councillor Hollingsworth, carbon neutral development. Do you have a supplementary at all?
Thank you to Portfolio for the answer. No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Question 24, Councillor Henwood to Councillor Hollingsworth, carbon neutral evidence.
No supplementary.
Okay, we have question 25, Councillor Henwood to Councillor Hollingsworth on Littlemore Priory.
Yes, I do. Can I assume that the planning enforcement criteria has been met on the Priory, and has the work finished?
Having not been briefed on where the enforcement is, I think what I would rather do, rather than give a misleading answer or an inaccurate or an incomplete answer, is get that in writing. So if officers could record that and ensure that the relevant officers are asked to provide the councillor with a written answer to that and copy it to me, and if they could do it ideally, well, let's say ideally within 24 hours, but reasonably by the end of this week, that would be good.
Yes.
Could it be copied to the Littlemore councillors as well, Lord Mayor?
I've no doubt that all those to whom it can be who wish to have it copied to them, parish council, the Littlemore councillors, etc., can have a copy.
Yes, let's try not to have a discussion about it, but I suggest Councillor Henwood, if you want to just frame that question.
Apologies, sorry, I realised that was Councillor Tanner, not Councillor Henwood heckling. I shouldn't have asked.
It was Councillor Tanner.
Well, I accept Councillor Tanner's recommendation. I think that was an excellent idea. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and if you could just frame that question, Councillor Henwood, and send it to Councillor Hollingsworth to make sure that it's answered correctly by officers, and then the result could be circulated. Councillor Henwood to Councillor Hollingsworth on Road Statue Oriel College. Do you have any updates?
No supplementary, Lord.
And next questions from me to Councillor Hollingsworth, Seacourt parking costs. My supplementary would be cost per parking space is over £9,000. How would that compare to a normal surface car park?
Not being au fait with the civil engineering price books as I used to be, since I used to publish them, I would need to seek advice on that one.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind circulating the answer to members, thank you very much. Councillor Wade to Councillor Hollingsworth, Seacourt Park and Ride completion. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to say that if there are any additional costs, and I appreciate these aren't anticipated at the moment, then if Councillor Hollingsworth can let members know when that's the case. Thank you.
Councillor Wolf, Councillor Hollingsworth on Barton house prices. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, Lord Mayor, yes. Councillor Hollingsworth will note that I didn't personally express the views, agree with the views expressed by the residents. The interesting thing is that this is what people widely think, in which the Oxford Mail actually perpetrated this issue, stirring it up, I suppose. Thank you very much for a very full reply, which spells out the picture, which I do understand the picture very clearly. But I would guess that most of the population of Oxford does not. It would be a pity if that reply was wasted. I'm not a great media watcher, and I'm just wondering what steps the City Council have taken to communicate to the residents of Oxford quite how all this works, because you know there's widespread ignorance about how these things work, and I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps things if people don't understand. How is that sort of thing communicated to the public? Has it been, and could we be doing better at doing that, do you think?
Thank you, Councillor, and I apologise for impugning your motivations in my answer. The council makes every effort to convey those. I'm sure the press team are listening in here and would probably be beating their heads metaphorically or actually against the desk, the suggestion that they don't. But you're quite right. It is something that can be often misunderstood. I think, to be fair to local journalists, the reporters who've reported on Barton Park and other schemes have been scrupulously accurate in what they've reported. I have absolutely no criticism of that. Occasionally, the opportunity of the editorial column, whoever writes that on a given event, can lead occasionally to rhetoric going beyond fact, but I think the difficulty is often the below the line comments. People see what they want to see in a story, and of course the most recent story, the one that you quoted in your question, did include councillors of this council who effectively stoked the fire, as you said, and you know, I understand that you know, there's a desire to make a political point, and you know, when that political point is entirely valid, I accept that. When it involves trying to mislead, I think that's probably not. So, you know, there we go. But you're right, it is a difficult and complicated thing to try and explain, and the council, through its cabinet, through its councillors and through its staff, will continue to try and explain it.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. That's a metaphorical bashing of heads against a virtual desk. That's an image that will stay with me for some time. We have the question 30, Councillor Wolf to Councillor Hollingsworth, on Barton Park viability and pricing. Do you have a supplementary?
I don't, Lord.
Thank you. 31, Councillor Henwood, Councillor Upton, COVID-19 public safety powers. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, Lord Mayor. Could the portfolio holder clarify if officers have made recommendations to the Chief Executive to close any premises?
I'm not aware of them doing that at any point, and I think I would be if they were. It's a very good question, though, Councillor Henwood, and I think one of the motions that's coming up later tonight asks us to get a report out to all councillors about how these decisions will be taken. So you will get that information at some point in the near future.
Thank you. A very prescient question, given the business later on. 32, Councillor Wolf to Councillor Upton, bike thefts. Do you have a supplementary?
I'd just like to thank Councillor Upton for taking the initiative to let me know about that Safer Streets funding, which is very useful. So there's no supplementary, thank you. It was great.
Okay, 33, Councillor Wolf to Councillor Upton, anti-social activity. Do you have a supplementary?
No, I'd just like to thank you for reaffirming the importance of that Safer Oxford email address. I think that needs greater publicity.
Councillor Wolf to Councillor Tidball, racially motivated incidents. Do you have a supplementary?
I don't. Thank you very much.
Question 35, myself to Councillor Brown. Thank you for your response. No supplementary. Question 36, Councillor Henwood to Councillor Alder, BAME representation on the Cabinet. Do you have a supplementary?
No, I thank the portfolio folder for the response.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henwood to Councillor Brown, thank you flag. Do you have any supplementary?
Disappointed. I like Oxford to be a welcoming city. A thank you or a welcome flag, I think, would send out a very clear message. But if the leader feels that it's not necessary, I accept.
That's not quite what I said, Lord Mayor, if I may respond. I said that, one, I thought we have done quite a good job of thanking people in our city, both as councillors and as local residents. I'm not myself clear how people would recognise a thank you flag, but perhaps more important than all of that, we are currently not able to fly any flags because of security issues in terms of accessing the flagpole. So it's all slightly irrelevant with that in mind.
Yes, thank you. But I took that as a supplementary question and response. So thank you for that response, Councillor Brown. 38, Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown on Localis sponsorship.
No supplementary, thank you.
And from myself to Councillor Brown, local government reorganisation. So thank you for your answer, no supplementary. Question 40, Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown on local government reorganisation 2. I guess that just means it's the second question. And the final one, do you have a supplementary, Councillor Gant?
No, colleagues will be pleased to hear that I don't.
Oh, we're always pleased to hear from you. So thank you very much, everyone. That's item 13 completed in good time. What I suggest we do is move to item 15 and come back to public addresses and questions at 7 o'clock. We can't really do that before because people have been told to turn up for 7 o'clock. So if we move to item 15, outside organisation partnership reports, and we have Children's Trust Board, and I believe Councillor Tidball is going to present this report.
Yeah, that's right. So this is just an update to be noted by council. I just wanted to give a brief overview of some of the work that we've been doing as a council, which has been really effective during the last period. So the Children's Trust Board brings together the public and private and voluntary sectors and to try and work together at a strategic level. In the year 2019 to 2020, the trust priorities were children missing out on education, social and emotional well-being and mental health, and protecting children from domestic abuse. I just really wanted to highlight some of the work that we've been doing as a council. We have had input on the terms of reference, making sure that there's been a real focus of the group in terms of equality and diversity perspectives in terms of looking at all the papers that we see and review. I'm also requesting for a new representative from another district council on the board. In terms of the priorities that I just mentioned, as a council, we've done some really important work around the attainment gap aspect, and particularly on raising the profile of the need for more work around the SEND attainment gap, the BAME attainment gap, and the deprivation attainment gap. And I'm really pleased to say that later this month there will be an Oxford Strategic Partnership Summit, Education Summit, looking at those three strands, chaired by Jan Royal, and we will be looking at what work can be done to close those gaps. There's more information in the report on that. And also wanted to highlight the really effective partnership working that was done through our Children and Young People's Partnership Board. This met every 2 weeks early on in the crisis. I attended most of those meetings. Really hard work from our officers and many other local partners in the city and the wider county on making sure that we knew what was going on with young people in the city during a really difficult time. And one of the pieces of work that came out of that, and one of the achievements really, was a survey on issues affecting young people through COVID-19 and what more needed to be done by us to extend that support. You know, whilst we have all seen demands across the council on resources, I am really pleased to say that we were still in a position to be able to invest £30,000 in supporting young people through the summer holiday activities work in conjunction with our Youth Ambition team. And our Youth Ambition team have worked exceptionally hard, and I really like to thank Joseph Barrett and Holly and Craig Morby and many others in that team. Between them all, they contacted all the young people that we had been working with in the previous 6 months to make sure that they were okay and that they knew what support was available from us and other partners. And that was a really big undertaking at a really difficult time. So I want to just thank all officers for the work that they've done, and really for the other investment and support that they've attracted from other organisations, including, I'm just going to mention really quickly, our Community Impact Zone, which has attracted 144,000 of external funding for community work with young people in East Oxford.
Thank you very much for that rapid conclusion at the end. So does anyone have any questions? Councillor Gant, you have your hand up. And
yes, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. First of all, sorry, am I going ahead?
Yes, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, thanks very much for this report, which makes very interesting reading, and very good to see that this absolutely vital issue of equality of educational attainment is being taken so seriously. I've got two questions about really different things. One is a sort of a process one, but I was very interested in paragraph 10 when you reviewed the terms of reference. I was actually quite struck reading at the beginning that there is only, or was only, one district council representative on the trust, and you've put that up to 2, but you've made sure that one of those is always from the city council and the other one revolves, as far as I can read it, around the others, which having witnessed some cross-council bodies trying to sort of allocate their membership is a very impressive bit of sleight of hand. But I hope that the other councils are content with that and feel that it will work well. Second thing, perhaps more substantially, is whether the trust has looked at all at the operation of pupil premium in educational attainment.
Thank you. If you could answer that, Councillor Tipple. Just
so on the first, I mean, it's fair to say that actually the board was very supportive and complimentary of the role that the city has had on the board in terms of check and challenge, but also in some of the joint work that has been done, including our children and young people's strategy. And I think one of the things that's clear to them is, within the city we have a higher concentration of deprivation amongst young people, a higher BAME population, and have continually raised the concerns that we have around the BAME attainment gap, and also in terms of health inequality. And I think we'd
Councillor Tipple, we're having problems with hearing you, so I suggest you try turning off. Yeah, and yeah. Do you want to carry on? I'm afraid that's still very unfortunate. We can't hear you. No, try once more. No, is anyone else able to respond to this report at all? No, I'm afraid it's too staccato, I'm afraid. So what we'll do is maybe we'll allow a bit of time later to come back to that report, because I know we've got some questions from Councillor Wolf and Councillor Rowley, and obviously you have to respond to Councillor Gant. So if we come back to that later, and we'll move now to item 16, annual scrutiny report. Councillor Gant.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Sorry, me again. Just to say, I won't go through the report, which is very well produced, as we've been lucky enough to come to expect from our officers, and so members will find all the information about the activity of scrutiny in the 2019-20 year in front of them. Perhaps just a couple of things to point out. Firstly, this was the first during this council year we welcomed our new scrutiny officer, Tom Hudson, who has kept up the high standards that we've come to expect from his predecessors, Stephen Robinson and Andrew Brown. And also that the volume of activity undertaken by scrutiny, which is outlined in the graphic on page 7 of the report, shows a pretty considerable increase. Not necessarily a measure of anything in particular that we do more meetings and more recommendations, but I think it does show that a mature scrutiny function is functioning and is functioning well. The first number on that page is that 20 non-executive members were involved in the scrutiny function, which is more than half of the non-executive members, and that in itself is a strength. The Climate Emergency Review Group was one of several which continued the good work which those kind of groups continue to do, among others, yet to have its recommendations responded to because of delays caused by the current crisis. So I have nothing more to add to that, apart from just to thank our officers and everybody who's taken part in the scrutiny function during the year.
So I have Councillor Tibble's hand up, but I suspect that might be to do with the previous item. So Councillor Tibble, is it on item 16 you wish to speak?
I've tried.
No, I'm afraid it's still cutting out. If you try to
Can you?
It's still very poor, I'm afraid. Maybe you can put something in the chat to officers. The technical team might be able to give you some support. Otherwise, I'll propose to come back to it before 7 o'clock, before we have the public addresses, and hopefully by then something can be sorted out. If not, I'm happy to take it later in the agenda. So apologies for this. I know how frustrating these things can be, and we still have some outstanding questions. I know people were keen to hear about the report. But at the moment, I'm just seeing if anyone has any questions for Councillor Gant on the scrutiny report, annual scrutiny report. No. Well, I'd just like to thank Councillor Gant for his work as another year of chair of that scrutiny committee. As a past chair, I know it's challenging workload, and to be effective is a badge of honour. So well done, Councillor Gant, for another year of chairing the scrutiny committee. We've now, that was a report for noting. We obviously have to come back to item 15. What I suggest we do now is, I have various clocks here tell me it's either 6:39 or 6:37. We'll take an average of 6:38. And if we come back at 6:50, and then we'll hopefully be able to go back to Councillor Tidball at 6:50 and hear item 15, and then we'll go on to item 14 after that, which is public addresses at 7 o'clock. So if you'd like to take now a break until 6:50, and hopefully Councillor Tidball, you can get your technical issues sorted out by then. Okay, thank you everyone. Hello, for people who are still online, it's our 3-minute warning. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Thanks, Craig.
I think our the live feed has been paused, I think.
Has it?
No, that's not the case, Lord Mayor. We're still
No.
live, I believe, because we
Still
can't
live.
restart the stream.
Right, okay, fair enough. I just asked the question as to whether councillors Tidball's technical issues have been sorted yet. Do we know?
I've just been speaking to Marie, and she's trying to sort of reboot everything that she can to see if she can get back in again. But she's also going to send me her response to the address just in case.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's say if we have to revisit it later in the agenda, I'm happy to do so if we can't sort out anything now. According to my various clocks and watches, we are back now. People want to see my lockdown birthday cake. There it is. A bit of a fire hazard, but there we are. Yeah. There we are.
Happy birthday, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
It's a bit of smoke now. Right. So thank you, everyone. So I think we're going to try to return to Councillor Tidball to see whether or not we have got technical issues resolved. So Councillor Tidball, are you there?
I think I've just seen a message from her say that her internet's now completely gone. So I'm afraid that I think we're unlikely to hear more from her until we do.
Right. If you do want to communicate, you don't mind communicating, saying that I'm happy to come back to this later in the agenda, even after the very end, if her internet's any better by then. So I think in that, do we have the speakers? Claire Robertson, I have as the first speaker. Are they available, Jennifer?
Yes, Lord Mayor. We have speakers for addresses 1, 2, 4 and 5 present at the moment.
Well, let's start off with 1 and 2, and by then we'll probably be at 7 o'clock, and then the others will hopefully have arrived. So Claire Robertson, you're speaking in support of motion 17A, designated bathing water status for River Thames. Thank you very much for addressing council. You now have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Lord Mayor and councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of over 4,300 people, mainly local residents, who support granting designated bathing water status for a stretch of the Thames through Oxford. Why? Well, here in Oxford, we love our rivers, the Thames or the Isis, the Cherwell, and the numerous streams that encircle and flow through our beautiful ancient city. These rivers are part of our daily lives. Residents of all ages, students and visitors walk, run and picnic alongside them, punt, paddle and row on them, and swim, play and fish in them. The river is the beating heart of our summer and provides exercise, fresh air, beauty and reflection throughout the whole year. During lockdown, these rivers have also been a great source of solace and freedom for many people as well. Clean and healthy rivers provide humans and the wider ecosystem with numerous benefits, including much of the water we drink and wash with. This is especially true of the Thames Valley, where 80% of our tap water comes from rivers. Healthy rivers also fertilise the land and help prevent flooding, as well as being home to thousands of other species, from the kingfisher, otter and trout to dragonflies and water lilies. Sadly, across England, our rivers are in a terrible state. A few weeks ago, Environment Agency figures showed that only 14% of rivers across the nation are in good ecological condition, and not a single river passed the chemical pollution standards. This makes us one of the worst countries for water quality in all of Europe. The major culprit for this national failure is sewage pollution. data exposed by the Guardian newspaper revealed that in 2019, across England, raw sewage was released into rivers over 200,000 times for over 1.5 million hours. Locally, untreated sewage overflowed from 4 Oxford treatment works for nearly 2,000 hours in 2019. This is equivalent to 82 days of continuous overflow, or over 5 hours a day for every day of the year. That is a national and a local scandal. Legally, raw sewage overflow into rivers is only allowed at times of exceptionally heavy rainfall. Otherwise, sewage should go through at least 3 rounds of treatment to remove plastics and other solid wastes and microorganisms harmful to human health. However, sewage treatment works are already over capacity due to decades of underinvestment, so water companies often ignore the law and regularly release sewage into rivers untreated. The problem is worsened by lack of funding for and enforcement by the Environment Agency. There's also a lack of transparency from the water companies. For instance, Thames Water has sensors installed on their sewage overflows and could provide real-time alerts of sewage pollution, but do not. This is unacceptable. We deserve a healthy, clean river, safe for all to use and enjoy, and for other species to live in. So it's high time we ended sewage pollution in rivers. Designated bathing water status is an initial step towards this. It will enable the Environment Agency to carry out weekly water quality testing during the summer bathing season for harmful bacteria. The water quality will be rated from excellent to poor, both annually and weekly. The information will be publicly available, with the council compelled to display it online and on signs and give alerts when pollution levels are high. This system is already in place for over 600 bathing waters around the UK. Almost all are beaches, some are lakes, but there are no designated rivers. If we move quickly, the Thames in Oxford could be one of the first 3 designated bathing rivers in the UK. Designated bathing water status will enable swimmers and other river users to avoid river pollution and stay safe, and also pressure Thames Water to invest in upgrading the sewage system and treatment works upstream, increasing capacity so they no longer overflow during rainfall events. These treatment works need to be fit for the 21st century, including the twin challenges of climate change and a rising population. Back in the 90s, only a quarter of beaches passed the minimum bathing water quality standards. A concerted effort by campaigners and local government forced the water companies to invest in improving their infrastructure, and now 98% pass the minimum standards. The same can and should happen for rivers. It's time to start treating our rivers as what they are, a beautiful and precious natural gift and resource, rather than an open sewer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your address, and hopefully you can stay with us for motion 17A, which you've addressed, and I think we'll probably get to that about 7:15, 7:20, something like that. So thank you very much. And now Liz Sawyer, who's speaking on Oxford livable streets in support of motions 17D and 17J. Liz, you have 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Councillors, I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Oxfordshire Livable Streets in support of motions 17D and 17J about the introduction of low traffic neighbourhoods and the Livable Streets initiative. What exactly is the problem that these motions are addressing? Let me give you an example. We have all done this at some point. Stuck in immobile traffic and running late to get to your meeting, your appointment, or your mother, you reach for your phone and you let Google solve your problem. And it does work. You leave the main road and are soon poodling along back streets and past people's houses until you rejoin the main road, and you make it to your destination just about on time. So no problem, huh? Except that there is a problem. That secret solution that Google gave to you, Google also gave to every other person sitting in that traffic jam who reached for their phone out of frustration. And whereas perhaps 10 years ago, only a few people had sat-nav and could make that spontaneous detour, today almost everyone with a phone will try it. And there are so many more cars now because of the growth of the city. Those traffic jams are daily and continuous as opposed to occasional. So instead of turning smoothly back onto the main road at the end of your detour, you are now sitting in a line of 20 other cars along the length of that neighbourhood street, perhaps with local residents trying to cross the road in front of you or squeeze a bike past, waiting increasingly impatiently to turn back onto the main road, and more likely to make a slightly dangerous manoeuvre to do so. And when you do turn back out, you are inevitably sitting behind that same car that you were when you left the main road, understandably more frustrated about being thwarted. And this is the problem. That neighbourhood street now is blocked at rush hour most days, with people trying to rush their cars through. The residents can't get their own cars out to get to work, and because of the traffic jam, they feel that the road is too dangerous to cross, especially if they're taking children to school or are elderly or disabled. And the street now is noisy, polluted and squashed. So who would want to walk or ride a bike along it? People who would otherwise choose to walk or cycle are forced to drive because it is too dangerous and unpleasant not to. It's a vicious circle. It's caused by people who do not mean to cause a nuisance, but are simply trying to solve a problem that is not of their making. But the cumulative impact causes very real problems. Ironically, more traffic. Remember those people who can't walk through their neighbourhoods anymore? And this is before we mention those who live elsewhere, but used to walk or cycle through those quiet streets rather than drive, and who now can't find a safe, quiet, unpolluted route anymore. That neighbourhood street now has more air pollution, more noise, less space, and these all make people less inclined to use it for walking, cycling, exercise, or even stopping for a chat with their neighbours. This contributes to rising social isolation, obesity, and decreased social mobility. The solution is low traffic neighbourhoods. They've already been employed in many areas for decades, albeit not under that name. You will all know of grouped cul-de-sacs joined by alleyways, or streets with bollards or a gate at one end, or even just a street that leads straight onto a path in your wards. These roads provide not just residents, but all others who need to pass through the area with alternatives to the noisy, clogged main road. And if done right, if there are enough of these routes that they provide an attractive and safe continuous path from A to B around the city, they will actually tempt people out of their cars and into a more sustainable way of travelling, such as walking, running, riding a bike, or scooting even. A single car taken off the roads this way starts to slow that vicious circle and build a virtuous one instead, which truly does benefit everyone. This problem of unusable residential streets is not the fault of any one person. It is simply a situation that has developed when normal people are faced with a lack of viable choices. It is your job as councillors to face up to this situation and take responsibility for creating the solution. Low traffic neighbourhoods or everyday roads with simple adaptations such as planters or bollards, so that they can meet the 10 very straightforward criteria of the Healthy Streets indicators. That way you give people choice again in this crowded but essentially beautiful city to travel in a way that has minimal impact on others. Because after all, people don't want to clog up other people's roads as a nuisance. On behalf of Oxfordshire Livable Streets and all the ordinary people who simply want a choice about how to travel, I ask you to support these two motions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz Sawyer, for that, and thank you for addressing council. My profuse apologies to Councillor Linda Smith, because I forgot to give her the opportunity to respond to the first address, but she's kindly agreed to respond at the time she proposes the motion. So Claire Robertson, also I apologise to you, but now I'll move. I won't forget Councillor Tom Hayes is going to respond to Liz Sawyer now.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Liz, and thank you for joining full council today. This City Council supports the creation of a new network of low traffic neighbourhoods through the reallocation of road space away from the private car. We believe that LTNs are one tool in the transportation toolbox to address three challenges: the historic challenge of air pollution and road safety, the present pandemic, and the future impacts of the climate emergency. We believe in LTNs because they facilitate healthy place shaping, which we are committed to as a council as part of the Oxfordshire Growth Board. Healthy Streets is a valuable tool in implementing and monitoring effectiveness of LTNs, and we look forward to working with county public health colleagues on this, and we will seek to learn best practice from TfL colleagues. LTNs are in development in Temple Cowley, Church Cowley, Florence Park. These are schemes which were intended as part of Tranche 1, and the County Council has included further LTNs in Jericho and Walton Manor, Quarry Village, Headington, Old Headington, Divinity Road, St Clements, St Mary's as part of its Tranche 2 bid, which we are waiting to hear news about. It's important to lay responsibility where it lies, and as highway schemes, the County Council are the only authority which can implement them. The City Council supports LTNs in principle, believes they can address key challenges, and seeks to work with colleagues at the County Council to ensure that LTNs can be a success. We seek to encourage the implementation of LTNs in the right places after consultation. LTNs may create differences of view, that's fine. In a democracy, we can all air our views and through dialogue seek to reach a consensus position. With the introduction of an LTN, there would clearly be a period of adjustment as rat running drivers discover they have lost the ability to take their favoured routes through previously high traffic neighbourhoods. And having consultation will be key to making sure that everybody can sustainably support schemes going forward. The City Council believes that consistent and extensive engagement and consultation with the public and all stakeholders is essential for the success of transportation schemes, including LTNs, and will continue to emphasise this to the County Council. Indeed, in recent months, we've secured a temporary city centre bus gates consultation from the County Council. We want to listen to local people's concerns. People know their streets better than anyone else. Of all levels of government, councils are most in touch with ordinary people's lives. We're well placed to listen to our neighbours and local people and explain the ways in which we stand to gain most from reducing car use, air pollution and carbon emissions. To date, the City Council has not been formally involved by the County Council in LTN developments. However, we are seeking to support their implementation in the best way possible for residents and businesses. We regret this lack of consultation and engagement because the City Council is well placed to play a role regarding consultation, including through our inclusive transport and movement focus group, to which the county and city councils have received excellent input on transport plans.
Time.
The overall success of LTNs relies on simultaneous traffic management and active travel improvements to arterial and radial routes, and that's why we support city centre bus gates on a temporary basis, as well as the Tranche 2 measures. And if I may, this is a different version to the one I submitted last, so I'll send on the final version to Liz, which has got a bit more information in there about the practicalities of what we support, and I'll speak to that in the motion later.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that response. And we now have, do we have Tim Jones and Dwayne John available to address council?
We do.
Great. Welcome to council, Tim and Dwayne, and you have 5 minutes to address council from now.
Okay, so we actually have myself, Tim Jones, and my colleague Michael Stewart St. Rose. Unfortunately, Dwayne couldn't join us for the call today.
Fine, just you still have 5 minutes to divide it up.
So I believe you have a copy of our speech as well, so I'm just going to go ahead and read that out.
We do.
So, dear Oxford City Councillors, as you are aware, sadly, Oxford no longer has the Afro-Caribbean Club. As a group of mainly African Caribbeans, we have come together to form the Oxford African Caribbean Multicultural Association, as we believe it's absolutely critical for Oxford to have its own multicultural hub in the community. Having spoken with countless people in Oxford, the need for a community hub is very clear. Thus, we write to you appealing for your support to help the Oxford Afro-Caribbean Multicultural Association, or abbreviated to OACMA, acquire the Cowley Marsh Pavilion building as a social and community hub for our association. This building, which we would like to name the Windrush Hub, would exist to 1, provide adults, parents, carers and children a space to gain support from each other through various groups. 2, provide assistance for anyone suffering from domestic violence. 3, provide low-cost meals at the Windrush Hub Cafe. 4, provide a legal advisory service for youth and adults subjected to stop and search, etc. 5, assist isolated members of the community and provide them with a social hub. 6, provide activities for classes for social, mental and physical well-being. 7, give recognition to talent in the community through exhibitions and display, talent shows, plays, etc. 8, set up an advisory service to deal with financial and housing issues. 9, mentor and support young people with continuing education and career paths. 10, set up a health and wellbeing hub in partnership with other health organisations. 11, work with charities and the local authorities to provide a food bank and food larder for those struggling within the community. 12, provide a space for learning of all ages and abilities such as homework clubs, training, adult learning and multicultural history, etc. 13, put on various events around cultural diversity, such as social gatherings, a yoga festival, art therapy classes, dance classes, and music lessons, etc. And 14, we would provide highly experienced exercise and fitness instructors to run classes and workshops for the different age groups. The OACMA has started fundraising with a view to covering running costs for the hub, the CMP building, and are in the process of applying for sponsorship and charitable funds. In addition, we've submitted to the cabinet member and the head of service projected figures for the potential income from yoga classes and the Dominoes Club, which will be a major part of what we hope the association will be able to offer the community on an ongoing basis through what we'd like to call the Windrush Hub, a community venture based at the Cowley Marsh Pavilion on a long-term peppercorn rate lease. We can only begin to generate these revenues once we have access to this building. We are well aware there are other Afro-Caribbean, multicultural and LGBT groups that we are personally connected to that could also benefit from having access to the Windrush Hub, whilst also contributing additional revenues to the charity. And we have initiated discussions with them, but have not able to give more specific details in time for this particular meeting. However, we can continue to keep you updated on progress from these discussions as they evolve. We appeal to the Oxford City and County Councils to consider this request and the detailed proposal that we have submitted to the Cabinet Member and Head of Service. It would be fantastic if we could gain access to the building at a peppercorn rate in time to host some specific events during Black History Month. So we would very much appreciate a speedy and positive response on this. So that's the end of our text, but I'd just like to also add that we had to submit this before we were able to view the building. So having viewed the building earlier this week, we recognize the building in its current state probably isn't suitable. So we would be interested in having discussions about how we might be able to achieve getting the building to a suitable state, or how we might be able to temporarily be housed elsewhere in the meantime until we can do so.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your address to council. Now I'm hoping Councillor Tidball, I see she's back online, is having better luck with her internet connection and can respond. So Councillor Tidball, are you out there?
Out there.
I think that's still too bad, but I believe you passed your response on.
Can you hear?
No, I'm afraid it's still too poor. Councillor Brown, did you have that response from Councillor Tidball to read out?
I do. So first of all, apologies for not being Councillor Tidball, but can I, on her behalf, thank you for the Oxford African Caribbean Multicultural Association for submitting their proposal to councillors. And as she says, we can see how much thought, work and passion has gone into putting this important initiative together. So thank you very much for that. And I'm pleased to note that the council's been working with you in providing advice in relation to the proposal, and also that there are other groups that have also expressed similar interest in relation to Cowley Marsh Pavilion, only to be deterred when realising the capital costs required, which I think may be something that you also recognise now that you've actually seen the building. We are therefore going to ask Oxford City Council to continue to work with organisations like yourselves to develop proposals that fully consider all the cost implications, not just to focus on the services that may be offered. And that will ensure that energies are invested in developing proposals that have an opportunity to truly be successful and sustainable. Given the potentially high capital costs and the level of risk associated with managing large sites, we would recommend that initially and in the interim, you seek to utilise existing community facilities through individual booking arrangements, and that could further support the demonstration of need and support help with developing more long-term proposals. Additionally, Marie has asked officers to work with you to identify room booking space rent community spaces at the subsidised rates for community organisations, so you can undertake the initiatives you're proposing for Black History Month, whilst ensuring you're also supported and advised on the public health advice for COVID-19. That said, we want to assure you and other community groups that have expressed similar needs or demands to councillors that as part of the council's ongoing commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion work, we are reviewing the use of community assets to ensure that they do work better for all the diverse communities of Oxford in a much more inclusive context. This will benefit not just the generations of today, but also the diversity and generations of tomorrow too. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure Councillor Tidball will also be back in touch as well. Her technology problems unfortunately hindered her this time, but she's here listening as well. So thank you very much for addressing council. And now we have, I'd just like some advice. We have 2 addresses on the same motion. Can I just ask, is that 5 minutes each for Tim Bearder and Andrew Heaver?
No, it's 5 minutes between them, Lord Mayor.
5 minutes between them. Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. So Tim Bearder and Andrew Heaver, I take it, I'm not sure whether you have conferred, but you each have a combination of 5 minutes between the 2 of you. Tim Bearder, I have your name first. Would you like to address council?
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Yeah, so Sir David Attenborough has recently called on world leaders to do more to protect nature. He made his plea as 65 heads of state, including the UK's, signed a global pledge to reverse losses in the natural world. They were doing this because a UN report found that around 1 million species are now threatened with extinction. This often sounds like an abstract problem that is having an impact on the Amazon or somewhere else abroad, but not here in the UK. And yet 1/4 of our native mammals are now risk of extinction. Our own MP for Oxford East made an impassioned speech to the House of Commons last year when she said, "We also need to make sure we are protecting wildlife in every single new development." And she said that particularly includes those between Oxford and Cambridge. Her words. Yet, when the Sidling Copse Nature Reserve is threatened by over 1,100 houses, Annalise Dodds has remained deafeningly silent. The Wildlife Trust have themselves said that this development would be a disaster for those rare species in our local woods. But Miss Dodds has so far refused to challenge the developers or this council, which has up until now fully supported this plan. Now, I know members of all parties want to see more houses built, as they should. We are in the grip of a housing crisis. But as Annalise pointed out, it must be done with the environment at the heart of everything we do. We can't just keep saying these things and then doing the opposite. So please don't just back the motion before you here today. Please also act to condemn the destruction of sensitive green belt land and the Wildlife Trust have said will have a serious negative impact on the rare and endangered species close to Barton, Sandhills and Risinghurst. Anybody who has watched Attenborough must now understand that warm words followed by inaction is no longer an option. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim Bearder, for your address to council. We now have Andrew Heaver. You have whatever the remaining there of that 5 minutes is.
Thank you. Councillors, the evidence is mounting. Access to clean air, green spaces and nature is essential for health. Take a look at the website of the government-funded NHS Forest Project and you'll see a long list of scientific reports confirming the benefits for our health. When all other factors are equal, citizens with access to trees and green space live longer than those without. The last few months have made this very real. Being able to get out into breathable air, wild countryside has made the fear and claustrophobia of lockdown easier to survive. More than ever before, we know how important trees, wildlife and countryside are for our well-being. This knowledge, however, is tempered by the sad reality that people in less wealthy communities often have poorer access to trees and green space than our wealthier counterparts. Oxford's answer to this social justice problem has long been our green belt. It's made it possible for those of us in some of the city's least wealthy wards, such as Barton and Sandhills, to escape into the countryside, even if our means have been limited. It's made it possible for us to live healthier lives, even if we can't afford the privileges available to others. In tough times, we can find peace and solace in the countryside without delay and without costs. And in this toughest of all years, that has mattered as much as ever before. And yet, in this toughest of all years, we've had to face up to the reality that this access is about to be snatched away from us. 1,000 new houses on countryside next to Barton and Sandhills, thousands more elsewhere. The planning inspector is allowing this destruction to proceed despite a serious lack of clarity on affordable houses or road access or deliverability. He was, however, able to reassure himself with a firm statement from your planning officers who told him that this council fully supports the proposals. Now, residents in Barton, Sandhills and elsewhere, we understand the need for more housing and for better housing. What's not acceptable, however, is the decision by this council to trash our air quality and countryside access for a scheme that neither guarantees affordable housing nor confirms how traffic chaos will be avoided. In this toughest of years, people who depend on the Greenbelt for our well-being have been taught a bitter lesson. Trees, wildlife and countryside might be essential, but Oxford's Labour administration seems to prioritise the profits of the few ahead of the health of the many. I urge the council and the administration to take a look into your hearts and think about where your priorities should lie. Thank you.
Thank you very much for addressing council. We have a response from Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll read what I have written. It's on the public record as well for the minutes. The shortage of housing, in particular affordable housing in Oxford, is something that is clear to all of us. That need was quantified in detailed work done for Oxford's local plan 2036 and has been rigorously tested over and over again in public hearings for local plans across the whole of Oxfordshire. As the local plan makes clear, the primary driver, indeed the overwhelming driver for housing need in Oxford is the need for affordable housing for the city's current and future citizens. The Oxford Local Plan 2036 also established that even with exhaustive searches for new sites, releases of greenbelt land inside Oxford for housing development, increases in density and height of buildings, the establishment of car-free development as the norm across much of the city, there was a substantial gap between the need for housing in Oxford and the capacity to provide it. It is because of that gap that all the councils in Oxfordshire agreed to help to identify sites in their control that could be assigned to meet Oxford's unmet need for housing. Beyond assuming that the housing need that has been confirmed must be met and proposing a principle that sites close to the city were preferable for both transport and community connectivity reasons, the City Council, other than for the Grenoble Road site where it is a landowner, has always left it to the best judgment of the 4 district councils to decide where best these sites could be found. Where sites have been proposed that meet that principle, the City Council as a formal consultee has been supportive, but again left the final decision to the relevant district council and the process of their local plan examination. And that is as true of the South Oxfordshire local plan as it has been of the local plans of the other 3 district councils. South Oxfordshire's affordable housing policy for sites close to Oxford is to require 50% affordable housing, of which 40% should be affordable rented, 35% social rented and 25% other affordable routes to home ownership. And while different to the policy of the City Council, which requires a greater proportion of social rented properties, it is nonetheless in line with the basis for the housing need figure for Oxford, which assumes that 50% of all new housing is affordable under the government definition. As Councillor Bearder says, warm words followed by inaction is no longer an option. For years, the need for more and more affordable housing in Oxford has been obvious, and the result of the current round of local plans across Oxfordshire is that that need is finally being recognised and met. To say we want more houses built to meet the needs of Oxford's current and future citizens, and then to do absolutely nothing about it, is the very definition of warm words followed by inaction. Balancing the needs of past, current and future generations and the need for homes, jobs, communities and the environment is difficult and involves difficult decisions and compromises. The local plans put forward, just finishing, and adopted across Oxfordshire by councillors of all political stripes have faced up to those challenges and put forward policies to meet them. Pretending that they don't exist, shying away from having to address them, cakeism, as the Prime Minister would have it, is simply dishonest.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth, for that robust response. We'll move on to the next address. And normally, of course, we would have named people. I understand this person wishes to remain anonymous. I'm very happy to respect that. So the person who wishes to address motion 17K on domestic abuse and COVID-19 workplace and community safety, welcome to council. You have 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I start, I wish to thank this council for giving me the opportunity to speak about domestic violence here. I also wish to thank Councillor Shaista Aziz for the amazing work and putting forward this motion. Also, my heartfelt thanks to all Oxford domestic abuse support workers, charities and organisations for their life-saving works. I'm here tonight to speak to you as a previous victim of domestic violence to explain some of the issues we victims of domestic violence face in escaping abuse and starting again. I tried numerous times to seek help and leave the relationship, and even separated several times, but each time encountered different obstacles. Some of the difficulties I faced at the beginning were having moved to UK due to an arranged marriage and had no one around to support me. So my immigration status was a barrier because I was at the beginning still on a spouse visa. Few years later down the line, I had children and I was working part-time and I had a mortgage. So I was not entitled to any benefits. And here I just want to elaborate on this. So there are many women who have no access to help, specifically to refugees, only because they are not entitled to benefit. I was even advised by Women's Aid to go to a hotel because I wasn't entitled to a refuge. So I was desperate to leave the relationship, and I was told to go to a hotel if I found the home environment unbearable. But I wasn't able to afford that, obviously. Even after fleeing to a woman refuge a few years later with my children following an attempt on my life, because of not qualifying for benefits, within a week I was advised to get myself a private rented property and just leave the refuge. Because the refuge fees were much higher than paying a rented property because of all the service charges and everything. So as you can see, every time I was forced to return to the abusive relationship, as it was so hard to survive on a part-time job with no support around and no support for victims and their children. However, the situation can be different, and how can it be different is when I was working full-time, that meant that I was able to support myself and my children, so I was not dependent on benefits or anything. Also, having a good employer. In my case, my employer was Oxford Health, which they have a fantastic employee support scheme and workplace domestic abuse policy in place. And the support I received at work from my team, from my managers, the occupational health, allowing me to have time off work whenever I needed it, knowing that there was always someone I could talk to. And I want to emphasize on that, how important it is, because for the victim of domestic violence, you can be really isolated, really lonely. You may not have any friends, anyone around to talk. And if you're working, your workplace will be the only place you can find solace and you can find someone to talk to or seek help. So that was really a big help to me. And I was even allowed to work flexibly to deal with problems. Yes.
Thank you. If you could just finish your next sentence, then we'll.
Yes.
5 minutes is up.
Yes, so that was it. Yeah, I just wanted to say that my workplace been a quite big help to me. Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for addressing council. Obviously must be a difficult subject for you to revisit, but thank you very much. And we have Cabinet Member for Safer and Healthy Oxford, Councillor Upton, to respond.
Yeah, just very briefly, because we don't have much time. I just wanted to say I think we all applaud you for coming along tonight. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to hear that you're in a much better place now. we've got some award-winning officers at the council who work with domestic violence, some of whom have been recognised nationally, but I know that not everyone is able to access the help that we have, and not everyone is aware of it. So I really hope that we can do more, and that just having you here tonight really helps. So just thank you again for bringing this issue and taking it from the realm of being some dry statistics to actually making us feel something about the real life horror of the situation that you've been in. So I think you're a hero. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. And as Councillor Upton said, we are very short on time and we won't get through both addresses and responses if people don't abridge their comments a little bit. So next up is Colin Aldridge on the Vagrancy Act of 1824. If you could be as brief as possible, thank you for addressing council. Colin Aldridge.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be brief. I come here today to speak about Vagrancy Act of 1824, which is still in force in England and Wales to this day. Even when first agreed, this act was criticised. William Wilberforce was a British politician, philanthropist, and a leader of the movement to abolish the slave trade. He condemned this act for being a catch-all offence because it did not consider circumstances as to why an individual would find themselves in such a predicament. The law was enacted to deal with the increasing number of homeless and penniless urban poor in England and Wales following the conclusion of the Neapolitan Wars. 9 years after the Battle of Waterloo, the British Army and Navy had undergone a massive reduction in size, leaving the large numbers of discharged military personnel without jobs or accommodation. Many were living rough on the streets or in makeshift camps. At the same time, a massive influx of economic migrants from Ireland and Scotland arrived in England, especially London, in search of work. The Act promotes and legitimises an attitude of dehumanisation of homeless people. Before the wedding of Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the leader of Windsor and Maidenhead Council encouraged police to use the Act to clear the streets of Windsor so the town was prepared for the considerable influx of tourists. The Act was used to prosecute 1,320 people during 2018 and is most employed by police as a threat to force rough sleepers to relocate. Fines levied under the Act are often deducted from weekly benefit payments. I could list many facts and figures to prove this Act deserves to be repealed, but the reality is people who find themselves homeless are not criminals through being homeless. They do not deserve criminalising, but do need help. There is many cross-party MPs working to deal with this Act. Why not give them a helping hand? I feel Oxford should make a firm statement. Let's make Oxford a city which asks our police not to use this law and then encourage other places to do the same. It's time for action. Let's make a difference. This Act has gone through several changes, including implementation in Scotland and Ireland, which was later removed. Finally, after almost 200 years, this Act is still adopted, which is still adopted and still using it. Having moved on from the past 200 years, ask yourself this: if this was an Act today, would you vote for it? And if you would like to see a small insight into homeless, I urge you to volunteer at one of the homeless shelters or establishments feeding them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for addressing council. We are very, very short on time. Councillor Rowley, we have your response written if you want to be brief in your response.
Nothing to add to my written response, Lord Mayor, except that I strongly agree. And although we don't control the police, we do discourage the use of totally obsolete laws. And we believe that the best way to get people off the streets is to approach people as individuals and help them with a multi-agency approach. I'm glad to be able to say that the police are involved in this. City Centre Police and Oxford Police is one of the few forces in the country with a dedicated homelessness officer liaising with people sleeping rough, and also with the council, the voluntary sector, the NHS and so on.
Thank you, Councillor Orley, for being brief. We have just enough time, I believe, for Magdalene Sokrani to talk about the Charter for Compassion. If you could be brief, we might even have a chance for a very brief response from Leader of the Council. So thank you, Magdalene Sokrani, for addressing Council. Would you like to start now? We can't hear you if you are speaking. I see you're still muted.
Sorry.
There we are. If you'd like to address Council, thank you for...
Right. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you again about the Charter for Compassion. Perhaps some of you visited the website following my address to the Chamber in January 2020. Back then, none of us could have predicted that COVID-19 was going to have such an extended and global impact on our lives. We've just passed the 1 million mark of people who've sadly lost their life due to the pandemic. The challenge for the world is how we can all live safely alongside this virus. The Oxford research scientists are working hard on a vaccine, which could then provide part of the answer. But for many of us, considering this existential threat, we're talking about pre and post COVID-19 and using and hearing words such as reset and rethink. Many of us have witnessed the outpouring of kindness, thoughtfulness, and neighborliness in our communities. We're learning that to keep ourselves safe and our lives moving ahead, we must abide by simple directives that are designed to keep everyone well and the other safe. In our world, we have around 2 million cities that all have struggles with poverty, homelessness, inadequate education, and growing inequalities. We have the technology, the people, the money, the volunteers, but the world is not working. Could the missing piece be compassion? The collective wisdom at the core of all cultures, philosophies, and religions from 1500 BC to the present day has never gone beyond the advice, or the golden rule, to dethrone self and place the other at the center. Archbishop Rowan Williams says that we need to make the transition from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. A compassionate city such as Oxford is uncomfortable when there are still residents whose lives are not thriving and flourishing or allowing each one to reach their potential. By signing the Charter for Compassion, Oxford will join the 430 plus cities around the world who have declared themselves compassionate cities. The Charter, a kind of indeterminate vision statement, is meant to galvanize, connect, and encourage actions that will create a more compassionate world. In these challenging times, there's a real need to develop a ground of compassion to regulate and reset new ways of executing, planning, reforming, and building our lives. It's time now to celebrate goodness and kindness. The Charter for Compassion invites communities of all sizes to integrate and bring compassion to life in practical and specific ways in businesses, schools, environmental projects, and faith congregations, etc. And on the website, there are suggested steps for a city to take on that compassion journey, and the C4C Community Toolbox has tools to help. If the City of Oxford decides to sign the Charter for Compassion, these steps might include a core group identifying, for example, Oxford's discomforts. This might be, shall we say, the happiness and well-being of our children, and then analysing the challenges and opportunities and choosing an initial focus for short and long-term objectives. In our example, this may be embedding compassion-based education in our schools. Other steps would include working towards a public resolution and affirmation of the Charter of Compassion in a launch event.
Start to draw to a close now, please.
Yes, and sharing as a charter partner Oxford's experiences with the global network. Oxford's twin city Leiden signed the Charter for Compassion over 10 years ago, and hopefully the Mayor of Leiden has communicated to you, Lord Mayor, the benefits of charter partnership. I humbly urge you to consider this proposal most seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the risk of showing a lack of compassion, we are very short on time, but hopefully Councillor Brown could give a very verbal response with
I'll give a briefer verbal response than I intended, and I will send the speaker the fuller version. So I'd like to thank Ms Zagrani for once again addressing us on this subject, and I can see this is clearly an issue very dear to her heart. And I have also heard from our twin city of Leiden about the work that they're doing as a city of compassion. And I think I would agree with her that the need for compassion in public life has always been important, and that the last few months have, I believe, shown our city living those values. We are already a city of sanctuary, accommodating and supporting refugees and asylum seekers. I have looked at the Charter for Compassion website, and I note that it recommends starting with community groups. And I would like to give Ms Zagrani the same message that I would give to someone seeking a twinning relationship between our city and another. We would encourage a strong community base to be in place before we would consider supporting this at a council level. If I use the example of the relatively recent Ramallah twinning, a grassroots friendship group had been working for nearly 20 years. I mean, that's probably a little longer than perhaps we would hope, before a formal twinning link was made. And similarly, the City Council worked with local asylum groups for many years before we formally declared ourselves a city of sanctuary. I applaud your aims, and while I believe that Oxford is recognised as a compassionate city, if you would like us to make this more formal, I think we need to see that there are groups to work with in our local communities on these very specific aims. But thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us.
Yes, and thank you very much, and thank you, Council, for your indulgence there. We had 7 speakers, 45 minutes, and inevitably went a few minutes over, but thank you very much for that. So now we're moving to motions. So item 17, we have a cross-party motion on designated bathing water status of the River Thames, proposed by Councillor Linda Smith. Would you like to propose the motion?
Thank you. I'd like to propose the motion, and at the same time thank Claire Robertson for the public address that she made earlier as well, and also thank Claire and the campaign for all the work that they've really put into campaigning on this issue. I was able to join them during the summer at a floating protest, also known as a Flotest, which was really well attended, and they've done really well with the petition as well, with over 4,000 signatures. So it really does show how much support there is for this out there in the city. I hope that everyone will vote for this motion. I'm really pleased it's got cross-party support tonight. Thank you, Craig and Andrew, for your support in getting it onto the agenda. This motion will commit the council to start the process for applying for designated bathing water status for the Thames in Oxford. All the arguments around it were put very well by the public address. I won't repeat them. So perhaps some things just to add. Thames Water made £500 million profit last year. And the investment in the waterworks is clearly necessary, both because of increasing population in the Thames Valley, but also to deal with the impact of climate change. It's clear that the existing infrastructure just isn't up to the job, but major improvements won't just happen by themselves, particularly, unfortunately, with Brexit and the calls to weaken environmental regulation. There's a real danger that the improvements won't happen unless pressure is exerted, and this motion is part of that. So it's about keeping up that pressure, and it's also about making sure Oxford is at the front of the line for that investment which is needed nationwide. And finally, this isn't just about bathers or swimmers. During lockdown, we saw unprecedented numbers of local people enjoying the rivers in canoes, paddle boards. I even saw a giant inflatable flamingo with 6 fully grown adults and several tins of lager floating down the river in Port Meadow one afternoon in August. And there were few scenes more iconic, really, than that scream Oxford more than students rowing on the Thames or punting on the Charwell. But how disgusting and how shameful at times that those rivers are open sewers, and this is an opportunity for us to do something about it. And I really hope we'll be able to vote for this, start the process, and the council will be able to work with the campaign group, but lots of other local organisations and groups as well that we know are really fully behind this. It's got to be a group effort. But so once again, thank you very, very much, Claire, for coming.
Thank you very much for proposing it. And it's actually going to be Councillor Wolf that second. So Councillor Wolf, would you want to speak to it?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I mean, personally, I have to say that my dealings with water and rivers is mostly about trying to stay on top of the water and avoiding it falling on me. However, my wife and many of her friends are very keen wild swimmers and have been doing a lot of swimming in the Thames. I will spare her blushes sharing with you the photographs of her and my 92-year-old father-in-law swimming in the Thames only 2 weeks ago. So it is a matter actually close to her heart. I think this is an excellent motion. I think as a first really, really important step is to get the warnings in place. I mean, it's shocking, frankly, to learn that even though the monitoring is going on, the people of Oxford don't know what's actually happening in their rivers. And it came as a shock to me when it was brought to my attention. As a very first step, that's absolutely basic, and I can see no reason why that shouldn't be happening. There are systemic problems here. Linda has mentioned quite rightly, of course, Thames Water. There's the question of the Environment Agency. There's the Canal and Rivers Trust. And I found myself thinking that, I mean, I've sat on planning committees quite a bit. I don't remember issues of sewage outfall and stuff from big developments ever really poking its head up on the agenda in planning meetings. I had a look in preparation for this at the application that went through for Gibbs Crescent, a big huge new development down on the river at Osney. And it was very instructive reading, which I think we can all take to heart. There were 33 conditions attached to the approval for that large development. Environment Agency, a statutory consultee, said this planning application is for development. We do not we do not wish to be consulted on. The Canal and River Trust said they were returning the application to us as there's no requirement for us to consult in our capacity as statutory consultee. This is a major development on the river. Thames Water said following initial investigations, Thames Water has identified an inability of the existing water network infrastructure to accommodate the needs of this development proposal. We have contacted the developer in an attempt to agree a position on water networks, have been unable to do so in the time available, request that a condition be added to any planning permission. As far as I know, it wasn't. So I might be wrong on that, I hope I am. There's a systemic failure here to address the questions which Linda has quite rightly raised about all this house building that's supposed to be going on in a low-level city full of rivers. Where does it go? How's it going to be addressed? Well, I think a very, very important first step is to get the monitoring made public and to get the designation from the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Well, to close now.
First step.
Thank you very much.
That's it.
Right, Councillor Gann, do you wish to speak? I have you down as well.
Yes, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. Because I'm formally down to support rather than second, just to make the point that this is cross-party, so I won't speak very long, but just to say I'm very happy to do that, and thank you to Linda for bringing this up and to Claire for the address. Just to echo Linda's point that during lockdown, the rivers in Oxford were a wonderful resource for recreation and access to open space in that way is such an important thing for social life and for physical and mental health, that we really need to do everything we can to make it an attractive and safe option. So I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you very much. Intending to move directly to a vote, as previously discussed at the pre-meeting, because it's a cross-party motion with a large degree of consent.
Lord Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Councillor Wolf's claim about the Gibbs Crescent planning application and its conditions is entirely inaccurate. There is an entire condition devoted to exactly the issue he's talking about.
I think we're glad to hear that. Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I have got Councillor Henwoods up as an independent member, so I will take his comments. Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth, for clarifying that.
Will be very, very brief, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for bringing this motion forward, and indeed to the Speaker as well. I would like to say that I believe the river is the responsibility of the City Council and the towpath that of the County Council. So I think this is something as a City Council we can really push forward.
Great, thank you very much. So now, Jennifer, would you like to manage the voting?
Yep, I think we can do this by raising blue hands, seeing as that seems to be working quite well. You might want to wait in case I change my mind as to which way we're voting. Can I see all of those in favour of the motion as proposed, please? Okay, and just bear with me till I check my list. So far I have 40 votes in favour. Councillors Hollingsworth and Hayes, can I check how you're voting, please? Councillor Hollingsworth?
I've voted yes, I think.
You have, and Councillor Hayes has as well.
Yeah.
That's
looks unanimous to me.
42 in favour and no votes remaining.
Thank you very much. That's unanimously passed. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next motion, which is applying and monitoring coronavirus restrictions, proposed by Councillor Wolf and seconded by myself, with an amendment by Councillor Brown. So maybe you'd like to start with talking about that amendment, Councillor Wolf.
Indeed, I would. Yeah, and we're very happy to accept that. I mean, I don't propose to speak at length on this because it is what it says on the tin. Really, it's all there, and it comes towards the key recommendation at the end that local councillors know what's going on. There's been so much confusion generally around the handling of the virus in this country. Trying to stay on top, and we're grateful for the briefings that we do get from the City Council, but certainly when it comes to wielding real powers to force establishments to close and the rest of it, it's really important we know what's going on. So I'm very happy to accept the amendment which Councillor Brown has proposed, which is providing a detailed briefing for members, setting out how the powers will be implemented. I think it's really important that local councillors, we know what's going on our patch, because inevitably we're bound to get it in the neck if people don't like what's going on. So I'll present it as written. So it is what it says on the tin.
Thank you very much. I was just wishing to formally second, but I'll hand on to Councillor Brown if she wishes to add anything since her amendment's been accepted.
Well, I'd just like to thank you both very much for accepting the amendment, which was entirely aimed to be a friendly amendment to try and get a briefing sooner rather than later. And I think it will be helpful for all of us because, as you've quite rightly pointed out, Dick, things have been very fast moving in this arena. So I think it's just a helpful motion with a hopefully helpful amendment. I hope everyone can support it.
Thank you very much. As Dick says, that amendment has been accepted. So we have Councillor Steph Garden wishing to speak.
Yes, I'd just like to thank councillors for bringing this motion forward. Obviously, we agree with it as well. I'd just like to add that if we are going to bring restrictions in and we're being briefed on it, if we could include enforcement practices as well, because obviously if we're going to have restrictions, we need to know how they're going to be enforced. So if that can be part of the brief, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have Councillor Upton.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that, yes, thanks for accepting this amendment. I think I just wanted to stress that we are going to huge lengths to avoid having to bring in any of these powers or having to use them. The leader of the council has regular meetings with both the universities, the senior management teams. Officers are using our extensive contacts with the business community to help and advise them about, getting things right. And we've set in place a support system, for people who do have to self-isolate. So, there's a phone number to ring, and I'm going to give it to you, 01865 249 811. If you wake up and you've got, coronavirus symptoms or a positive test, because we have got huge numbers of volunteers on standby who will go and do your shopping, who will fetch prescriptions for you. There are various organisations who can help with food parcels. If you look on Good Food Oxford, for example, there's a map of the different community associations and community larders and things. So just to say that we are doing what we can to make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing and self-isolate if you should. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that public service announcement. Maybe I don't have anyone else wishing to speak. Maybe I can just use my seconding time just to say that these are obviously new powers that were, legislation was only passed in July. They're only passed down to the City Council in September. So we know they're all very new and everyone's finding their way. I think this motion was put because we know it looks like they're going to be around for at least 6 months. So although I take Councillor Upton and Councillor Gardner's sort of points, that I really hope that we don't have to use these powers to close down premises, shut down events or close down open public spaces, which is all things that we can do under this Act. If we do have to do that, at least we'll do it in as open, a transparent a way as possible, so people will understand, members of the public will understand, the businesses will understand that why we've done it, and because they have a right of appeal, I think that's really important that we evidence things very thoroughly and very openly. So thank you. I have no one else wishing to speak, so can we now, Jennifer, move to a vote?
Yes, if all of those in favour of the motion as amended, please raise your hands. Let me just check a minute. So I have a feeling somebody may have dropped off my list.
I think Councillor still having problems. It might be her that is no longer able to join us.
Just check. I think I have all hands up. If I have miscounted anyone, please let me know. But I make that all councillors in support.
Thank you very much. So that's again a unanimous support for the motion. Thank you very much. We have now motion 17C, local government reorganisation. Motion proposed by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Hayes. We have an amendment proposed, I believe, not by Councillor Ganters on the papers, but by Councillor Rod Smith. I hope I've got that correct. Councillor Brown, would you like to propose the motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, this was intended to be a motion that I would hope that everybody would be able to respond, would be able to support. I mean, I think that all of us have been really quite shocked and horrified at the government's idea that this would be a good time to start conversations about reorganising local government. As we've already discussed, this council and other councils have been extremely busy looking after people in our cities and elsewhere who are in need of support at this very, very difficult time. And I think that it is really quite damaging to our relationships with other councils that we have been working very closely with in partnership to think that it would be a good idea to start having those very difficult conversations, because there is rarely any easy agreement on how to best reorganise local government. So the motion sets out the undemocratic proposals as far as we understand them so far, both from government, but also from some local councils, and also it sets out our opposition to the timing of these proposals, and really that's all I want to say at this particular juncture. I would have been interested to have heard as to whether the amendment is still going to be put. I did suggest to Councillor Gant at our pre-meeting that I would be happy to accept the second paragraph, but obviously I'm not going to accept the first paragraph. So I think that if Councillor Ross Smith was happy with that accommodation, we could avoid a rather lengthy debate.
Well, we'll pose that question to Councillor Smith soon, but Councillor Hayes, you're down to second. Would you like to second speak now or reserve your right?
Can I reserve my right? Actually, I'm really interested to hear people's contributions.
Okay, thank you very much. So now over to you, Councillor Smith, to either propose the amendment or accept the suggestion from Councillor Brown.
I'd like to propose the amendment if I could, please. I think there's some important issues in that first paragraph that I'd like to see kept in if possible.
Fire away.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Lord Mayor, fellow councillors. What does democracy mean to you? I asked a friend and fellow parish councillor this morning. That's difficult, she said, but then went on. For me, it's about everyone having equal say. That's why voting is so important. But it's also about getting decisions made that are right for the local community. Like me, she considers local decisions equally important as national ones that affect us all locally. Local decisions made at the right level can do and make a difference. They are best made with good consultations and data. My friend was dumbfounded to hear that Mr. Johnson's government is considering the time ripe for local government reorganisation when our country is still facing a pandemic, with job losses and an uncertain future for many individuals, businesses and organisations. I think our amendment strengthens Councillor Brown's motion, recognising that the current local authority system is not perfect. Recently, there have been some partnership projects between the Tory-run County Council and the Labour-run City Council that have worked well for our Oxford City residents, and these have got to be welcomed. As just agreed by Council this evening, the recent decision by the county to pass on powers under the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions Act to city and district councils to help counter outbreaks and to protect people is to be welcomed. This is a good example of how powers and decisions can and should be transferred or devolved to lower tier councils. But the Tory government centralising agenda for local government, this top-down reorganisation idea without any timings, is not to be welcomed. This is not democracy. Surely they should be facing and focusing on helping the country recover from the COVID-19 crisis and the climate emergency. Let's not forget that. I hope the councillors will be persuaded to accept our amendment. Let's all say no to anti-democratic planning changes and local government reorganisation, and say yes to local decisions by local people in local communities for local communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a seconder for your amendment?
Yes, I'll second, Lord Mayor, but I'll reserve the right to speak later if I may.
Thank you very much. So now opening up for debate on the amendment, I have Councillor Brown wishing to speak, followed by Councillor Tanner. So
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but I'm just going to say that I think this amendment falls into the trap that has been set by government for us, in that immediately dividing us between ourselves and other councils. And it is of course true to say that we have disagreements sometimes with our county council partners, but I think the more important thing at the moment is to dwell on the partnership, not on the disagreements. And so I certainly will not be supporting this amendment, which I think seeks to put in stone some of those disagreements, which I hope that we can always continue the conversations and come back to a point of agreement. And the real danger of this local government reorganisation and putting that on the table is that it absolutely emphasises those disagreements instead of the very many ways in which we can work together really effectively. And I think that during this time, particularly through the COVID pandemic, working with public health and the county council, we have done some really good work in our city, and we are working hand in hand with the Director of Public Health to make sure that people in our city are being looked after both by us and through the health system. And I think that is more important than focusing on disagreement. So I can't support this particular amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I think this is unfortunate because the second paragraph from Councillor Rod Smith and from the Lib Dems is really quite helpful. It talks about the stupidity of the national government, about which we can all agree. But getting into a debate about what would be the ideal form of government now, councillors, Lord Mayor, is not the time. Now is the time for dealing with the COVID emergency, with the other urgent matters that face us all, which Councillor Smith has referred to, not to be debating about what would be the ideal system. Because I'm sure if you went round the councillors of this virtual chamber, you would find each of us have a slightly different view as to how local government should operate. And so that doesn't take us very far at all. What we're saying to government is now is not the time to do it. If you like, the Titanic is beginning to sink and the government wants to rearrange the deck chairs. We want to stop it sinking. At the very least, to get Rishi Sunak to actually come up with some decent lifeboats to save people. The leader is quite right. What we need, Lord Mayor, is cooperation with the present system as we've got it, because it's the system that we have. And deal with COVID-19 and the other issues that we face under the present system. When all that is over, then we have all the leisure in the world, and let's talk about whether we should have Seacourt Park and Ride or not. I mean, this is very parochial, and I don't think it's helpful. And I'm very sorry that the Lib Dems and that Ross Smith are putting this amendment forward. I think we should oppose it.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Tom Hayes and Councillor Dick Wolf lined up to speak. And remember, we're speaking on the amendment still at the moment. Councillor Hayes.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I think there's two reasons why we ought to be supporting the Labour Group's motion as it is. The first is that now is not the right time for local government to be preoccupying, for local government reorganisation to be preoccupying this council or other councils. And it's also not the right matter to preoccupy local government generally. I think we should all have faith and confidence in the continuation of the two-tier system of local government. Exactly as Councillor Brown was just saying, by having the county working with the city, we've got creative tension, we've got accountability, we've got friction, which allows us, yes, to wear our differences, but to wear them in the pursuit of social good. And there's nothing more liberal than that. There's nothing more liberal than being able to share your view, air your differences, and hope to get somewhere better by educated and reasoned debate. So I'm surprised that the Liberal Democrats don't see that the existence of two sources of decision-making actually lead to that kind of creativity. It's also not the time to be having this preoccupation because we're going through the worst crisis since the Second World War. We should be asking Robert Jenricks, if he's not going to resign, which he should be, to rip up his plans and let us continue to work together across the county to get on with putting our communities back on their feet. If you go around asking our communities whether they want local government reorganisation, they're going to laugh at you. At a time when trust in politics is already plummeting, the last thing we need is to be going around to our communities saying that we're navel gazing and obsessing about this kind of a debate. The Local Government Association have said just in the last few days that an additional £10.1 billion is needed annually to help local authorities in England to plug their funding gaps. With that being so, Let's actually get investment into our local councils. We've gone through a decade of austerity. Let's stave off austerity on steroids, and let's protect the two-tier system of governance.
Thank you very much. I just got Councillor Wolf, and then we'll move to vote on the amendment. And I'm finding it a bit difficult to do time management because Jennifer's got the stopwatch and I'm having to rely on her sort of somehow signing to me that do it. So if people could be a little bit disciplined and maybe do a little bit of their own timekeeping. I know it's a lot to ask, but be much appreciated. Councillor Wolf.
Yeah, very briefly, Lord Mayor, if I may. I mean, I appreciate the amendment, but I don't think it really helps, to be honest, because it takes the focus away from the main point of the motion, which is about the imposition from central government of a solution, and about timing, and about the need for the support we actually need to deal with the pandemic. And it's a distraction from all that, and so effectively waters the thing down. It loses its bite.
So Councillor Gantz put his hand up as a seconder of the amendment. You are allowed to speak. You reserved your right. Then I'll come back to Councillor Ross-Smith for summing up the amendment. Councillor Gant.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. I will be very brief, but just to say, just to make it absolutely clear to members that the Liberal Democrat amendment doesn't delete or change a single word in the motion, and in particularly in the actions that flow from it. We just want to make sure that in terms of service delivery, I think the idea of creative tension is an interesting one. And of course, that is how decisions are made in a democracy. You have your arguments and you come to a consensus. But at the same time, you know, even on the agenda tonight, there are examples of where a lack of agreement has not speeded up the objectives that this council would want to see. And we don't do ourselves any favours by not recognising that. But just to be absolutely clear, the objectives of this motion are right and we support them. We do not support the centralising agenda of this government. We do not support top-down reorganisation imposed by Whitehall in this or in planning or in anything else. We do not think that this is the right time to be doing this. If there is, we absolutely agree with the last statement, which is that government gives the necessary powers and financial support to local councils in order to carry on dealing with the crisis as we are.
Thank you. I'll just hand over to you, Councillor Ross-Smith, to sum up.
Thank you. I'll be very, very short because I know we want to get on to other motions, including the local traffic neighbourhood scheme. I'm not looking to divide us at all, Councillor Brown. Not at all, not in this one. I think local democracy is for me, is absolutely one of the reasons why I became a councillor nearly 30 years ago, and will continue to champion local democracy and local councils, including, I think we haven't mentioned that this evening, some of our very active and able parish councils that we have in the city too. Councillor Turner mentioned not moving time to rearrange the deck chairs. Absolutely, Councillor Turner, I totally agree. And as Councillor Gant has said, we're not looking to change anything or take anything out of the original motion at all. But it does seem, Councillor Brown, that I've obviously hit a few sore points by mentioning the Seacourt Park and Ride, which is being built at an enormous cost to local residents and to the environment. We are all about climate emergency, and building an extended car park on the Seacourt Park and Ride on the Botley Road is not a good idea on so many accounts. It really isn't, and certainly not for the environment. Totally agree with Councillor Hayes with regard to Jenric's plans. Absolutely. Let's rid them up. Let's see him resign as a minister. He really shouldn't continue to try and reorganise our planning and centralise it as he has proposed in the white papers. Absolutely not. So yes, I shall be supporting this motion if you do not accept the amendment. But I would have hoped that some councillors would have seen the wisdom for including an example of where things have gone wrong and acknowledged that it can be accepted and we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you. I now move to a vote. Jennifer, would you like to do the voting?
Yes, Lord Mayor, if people can bear with me because I will need to jot down names, I suspect, this time. Could I see all those in favour of the amendment. All of those who are supporting the amendment, please, to put their hands up and keep them up. And then I will lower them and take the vote against. You may wish we'd done a roll call at the end of this. 8. So I make that 8 against, 8 in support of the amendment. I will lower hands, and then can I see all of those against the amendment, please? And that is 33 against, Lord Mayor. I make that a total of 41, so no one should, unless they shout, still have to vote, and the amendment is lost.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So that amendment falls. So now we're debating the substantive motion. So people wish to speak. Councillor Hayes.
Have I got my hand in the air? Oh, I have. Sorry, it's an old hand.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
I suspect we're not going to get to my motion on planning, so I shall just pitch some of the themes of it in supporting this motion. I think the hallmarks of the current government are well known. That kind of mixture of centralising tendency, a destructive tendency, an anti-democratic tendency. I think many of us thought it was a joke when we first heard that the Prime Minister's advisor wanted some kind of Death Star in which he and data wonks would sit and manage everything. Apparently it isn't a joke, and that is exactly how the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's advisor see the country being run. And I think today's news about test and trace probably indicates the unfeasible folly of the entire thing from top to bottom. But these proposals, like the planning white paper that Councillor Ross Smith's already referred to very eloquently, have all the hallmarks of this government. They centralise, they move power away from local authorities, and more importantly, they move it further away from people. Instead of, and this is where I probably disagree with Councillor Ross Smith, whether she meant to say this or not, I don't know. My view is that power shouldn't be devolved down from government. It should be derived upwards from the people, from the lowest level upwards. So the notion that the county council or the government issues power as largesse, I think, is one we should fight against. I think it should be very much the other way around. And decisions should be taken as close as possible to communities. And I've always been a very strong supporter of community and parish councils, and I'm very sorry that the referendum in Headington didn't deliver us another one. I think they are an excellent institution and are what local democracy and decision making are all about. But in looking at what the government has proposed, it should run absolutely counter to every instinct about how politics and how democracy should be done for every single person in this chamber. I fully support the motion, and I'm sure all of us will also support it, because it is so profoundly the wrong thing and the wrong direction that it almost defies belief that it's been put forward. But sadly, an experience of a centralising, privatising, destructive government shows that it is all too real, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ross Smith, you have your hand up to speak.
I do, Chairman, since Councillor Hollingsworth wanted clarification from me. Yeah, I mean, I do think that that he's right, that it should come from the people, absolutely upwards. That's what local democracy, one of these local democracies is about, how I opened my speech, in fact, actually. But when powers have been devolved down to, say, a county council or a major authority, and there is the opportunity to devolve them down further, I think that should be explored, particularly if they can be delivered in consultation with local residents and groups. And like you, I was disappointed to see the result of the Headington neighbourhood local council forum. But I think there's still a lot of lessons to be learned from that one. And I can assure you that local work in Headington area is still ongoing, and that many of the forum's identified projects are still happening and being delivered, which is great.
Thank you very much. So now we'll move to, I've got no one else wishing to speak on the substantive, which is unamended as 17C on the papers, agenda papers. So Councillor Hayes, I think you reserved your right as seconder. Do you wish to say anything now? Otherwise I'll move to Councillor Brown for summing up.
No, I'm happy to skip.
Glad you're happy. Councillor Brown.
Well, I don't think there's a great deal to sum up. I think largely we are in agreement on this, and I think it's just important to re-emphasise the basic points that we are in agreement on, which is that we are all opposed to this highly undemocratic, highly centralising approach that is being taken by government. And I think it's worth saying that although this appears to have slightly fallen off their agenda at the moment, we just don't know. We don't know when they might start picking it up again and reintroducing it. So I think it's very important that we do have a collective view that we're stating today, which gives our opinion of that whole process. So without anything further, I think I would just ask people to support this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So back to you, Jennifer, for voting. I noticed Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Smithy still have their hands up. Maybe you want to lower those before we move to voting. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
And Councillor Belly Summers, if we can take all of those who are voting in favour of the original motion as proposed. I make that at the moment 41 out of the 42 councillors who are here. And Councillor Aziz, can I just check if you're voting for, against or abstaining, please? Is Councillor Aziz able to speak? Nope.
I suggest we note that as an abstention.
Yep, still as an abstention.
Right, but the
so that's carried.
Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to, can I just do a time check, Jennifer? How long have we got left for motions?
Motions should finish, allowing a little bit of time to take the votes, about 20:45, Lord Mayor.
20:45. Great. So let's motion 17D, low traffic neighbourhoods to Oxford City, and that's proposed by Councillor Landor Mills and seconded by Ros Smith. And there are two amendments, and my understanding from the briefing is the first amendment from Councillor Wolf has been accepted. So perhaps you'd like to clarify that in your, but the second amendment by Councillor Hayes hasn't. So perhaps you'd like to clarify that when you propose the motion. So Councillor Landor Mills, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We are happy to accept the second motion. We think, the reason, there's minor quibbles, but I think it's the overall gain from supporting is far greater. The reason that is the case is it's very important that the City Council, the City Councillors, and all those we represent get really involved in what could be the LTN initiative. It's a big deal, and it will do a lot to improve, or has the power to do a lot to improve the quality of people's lives throughout the city in all different places. And those changes could really be fairly significant, and it requires a lot of detail, a lot of thought, and that's where we want to. And we've had about the backstory. We've had many years of 75 years plus of basically making our streets more amenable to cars and vehicles generally. And I think, the backstory is we now want time to basically make them, our neighbourhood centres, safer and more attractive to people. We've already had this evening the arguments for LTNs detailed, and I think that they are important. But I mean, to help, I mean, for me, they help build community and support local people, which is something that I think CARS, and if you look particularly from when Nicholas Ridley, in particular in the early 90s, put forward the big shopping centres, you saw devastation in places like Sheffield and many cities where things were just moved out, everything was moved out of town. Now, this isn't necessarily entirely, but basically moving away from a car-dependent local urban form of living, I think is a very important thing. And we will enhance, support local people. I think importantly also for some of people who are dealing with local businesses, I suspect it will strongly boost local businesses. And that's a big issue that we need to keep reviewing and looking at. And also I think the other thing is it's going to help transition to a low carbon society. I mean, we have to move to a low carbon society, and it's central that we do this. The delivery of, as has been stated, the delivery of LTNs is strictly speaking the responsibility of the county council. But the importance of this motion is to demonstrate that local city and city councillors support this LTN. What the reality is also that when the county council do it, they make a, well, I won't swear, but they don't do it properly. I mean, they fail to consult people.
So yeah, you just draw your sentence to a close.
So I'll carry. Yes, and so we want to basically show that we want the city involved and local councillors involved and local people, and to get that level of detail that will make these schemes successful. And I think that we need to be involved in feasibility studies, and I'm concerned that we make sure we have clarity of that. And I would like the city to put money in, not necessarily because we have a large amount of money, but I think it'll give us a place on the table and make sure all things like tree planting or benches or all the little details that make these things successful are included. So I hope these things will come along, and I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Underwills. And just to clarify your point, you're accepting both amendments, am I correct?
Yes.
So we are looking at the amended motion, discussing it as on page 57 of your agenda papers. There's the composite motion there for convenience. Councillor Smith, you're down to second. You used to speak
yes,
now?
I'd like to speak now, actually, Lord Mayor, if I could. Thank you. The forerunner for low traffic neighbourhood schemes was home zones, and some of you older people like me will probably remember those. And the home zones were different in so much as they started in design of the homes and the streets actually before the houses were built. And they concentrated on providing more pedestrianised feel to the residential roads. Now, I still have friends living in one that was put in central Abingdon, and they actually decided to go car-free actually after being there for 6 months, because they realised that they didn't actually need a car because they had good, strong bus links. And for me, one of the things that is going to be important for delivering these low traffic neighbourhood schemes, and I do support them very thoroughly, is that we have a good connectivity with our bus schemes. Now, the amendment, the second amendment, talks about the rural focus of the County Council's Tranche 1 bid. And I wouldn't disagree with that to some extent, except that it completely missed out Abingdon. And Abingdon is in need as too of low traffic neighbourhoods and of schemes that will improve connectivity by cycling and public transport between large areas of residential areas to employment areas. Now, the area I represent in Headington is a large employment area, and that is recognised. We have 6 hospitals up here. Now, not everybody can afford to live in the Headington area or closer to the Headington area within cycling or walking distance of where they work. So they have to commute in. And in Headington Quarry, the county's own figures show that we have over 500 vehicle movements an hour through a very, very narrow street off the Eastern Bypass and through a conservation area of Quarry. So I was very pleased when some local residents came to me, this is before Oxfordshire Livable Streets got involved as well too, to suggest that we had trialled a temporary traffic filtering scheme to see if we could actually stop that community traffic coming through the quarry conservation area and going out the other way at the end of the school day and of the commuter day as well too, and see how that worked. Yes, it would mean slightly longer journeys if you have to take your car. And I think you should actually, I mean, if you do have to take your car, you shouldn't feel guilty. You should feel really pleased when you don't have to take your car, when you use public transport or you manage to cycle or you walk to your destination. So I don't think we should get hung up about these cars, although I have to say that I am considering going car free myself now, because I've used the car so little over the last few months, I have to say. So I'm very, very in support of this motion. I'm in support of low traffic neighbourhoods, but we have to get the consultation right. As my colleague said, Councillor Tom Landon-Mills, we have to get the consultation right. We need the data from the county. I'd like all the city councillors to be on board as well. That's my county council hat on. When we considered the motion at full council at county, there were some people who did not support.
Time.
I can see. I'm just going to just finish if I could.
Now, so
yeah, thank you. Who were not so keen on local traffic neighbourhoods, but I would like to see all councillors at this council in support of local traffic neighbourhoods and actually working with the groups and to show what they can do and what they can achieve. But we have to be realistic, and I would like to see the city, perhaps in their future budgets, put in some budget to help with signage as such, which does help. Not the signage on the roads, but more like the Chester City scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a flurry of people wishing to speak, and I'd like to try and get to another motion after this because there seems to be a large, broad agreement on this one. I have Councillor Ed Turner, Councillor Wolf, Councillor Tanner, and Councillor Hollingsworth. So I intend to draw a line under that. So Councillor Turner.
Yep, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. There were two things I wanted to say. I mean, first of all, on the low traffic neighbourhoods, I'm really pleased to see this motion. I've been following this initiative for a while and was lucky enough to be briefed by a colleague from Waltham Forest who came to Oxford and met with community groups. This really is, I think, an idea whose time has come. It won't be easy. There will clearly be people who aren't in favour, but I think with very many interventions that are important for our commitment to climate change and are important as well in reducing levels of air pollution. There will, of course, be some pushback, but it's still right that we should pursue them, subject, of course, to all of the right tests and consultation. But the second thing I wanted to say was just briefly on the funding. In my experience, it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver than the other way around. And I would remind colleagues, I was talking in broad terms about an ongoing deficit in our budget of several £1 million as a result of the COVID crisis. In that circumstance, talking quite glibly about the possibility of future budget bids would, I think, potentially raise expectations that we would struggle to meet. Clearly, we as the City Council want to do what we can to support the low traffic neighbourhoods where they're wanted and where there's a good case for them. I really hope they will. I also have some streets in my patch that I'd like to see happen. It's something that I would consider supporting in a small way with some of my ward member spend. There may also be some neighbourhoods still allocated to ward members which could be used as well. But I think we need to be really cautious about raising expectations of large-scale funding, simply because unfortunately the government is not standing by us and we face a significant financial challenge in the years ahead. The best way of financing this will be with government funding, I think, which is allocated to the County Council for the purpose, Lord Mayor, if the County Council puts forward well-evidenced schemes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, we're very supportive of this. Councillor Simmons and I have been a bit ahead of the curve, I have to say, on this one, and we're currently, having had a professional scheme proposal drawn up summer 2019, embarking on a round of street level consultations, which are going very well. I have to say that the level of support from those who participate, and we've got a survey as well, is very high. We think there's public support very clearly. We've learned two things out of this. Well, we learned a lot of things. One is that the County Council doesn't have the traffic data that we need, so we're having to do our own traffic counts to find out that data. The second thing is how useful it is to have a professionally produced scheme proposal. You can't just go to people and say, well, what do you think? You know, you have to come up with something which you can then tweak. And that had to be paid for. I have to tell you that, that there's an element about that in our amendment, which has been adopted, about providing clear guidance on the use of ward member SIL. I have to say that because of my experience and involvement then in the Constitutional Review Group, we do actually have a line in our Constitution in which it says SIL monies must be spent on local infrastructure, which may include ... anything else to mitigate demands development places on an area, including one-off feasibility studies for further proposals for capital projects. So it is in there and we're able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tanner.
Lord Mayor, the big problem, it seems to me, with this latest batch of low traffic neighbourhoods is that the county council marches everybody up to the hill like the Duke of York and then marches them all down again. So that those of us who want to see low traffic neighbourhoods have our hopes raised and then dashed. And those of us who are fiercely opposed to low traffic neighbourhoods get all upset over nothing at all. And that seems to be the worst of all worlds. It's absolutely essential, as Tom Hayes has said earlier in the meeting, Lord Mayor, that we have prior consultation about these traffic changes. Because we have to remember that one person's rat run is another person's very convenient shortcut. And I think this is a great opportunity to really build back better, but we do need a little bit more consistency from the Highway Authority, the County Council. Thank you.
And I just have Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Hayes. So you were a late hand up, Councillor Hayes, but since you did propose one of the amendments that was accepted, I've said it's okay for you to speak. And so Councillor Hollingsworth, is that?
Yeah, did you want me first?
Yeah.
Okay. I just obviously in supporting the motion and thanking the mover for accepting both amendments, which I think add considerably to it. I wanted to emphasise, I think, the importance of seeing low traffic neighbourhoods like any traffic management proposition as something that's inherently challenging to put forward. Certainly Councillor Tanner and I will have long-lasting and fond memories of the difficulties in putting in what amounts to the first Oxford bus gate in the High Street and the pedestrianisation of Cornmarket. I think one crucial thing to emphasise is that you can do as much consultation, persuasion and cajolery as you want, but in the end you have to make a decision, because there will always be people who will disagree with what you want to put forward. And I've often said as something of a joke, the difficulty with traffic is that 99.8% of the British population regards themselves as a traffic engineer, and each will have their own ideal solution to whatever problem it is that you want to put forward. So that's the first thing. But the second thing that is difficult about traffic is that when you create winners, there is sometimes the creation of losers. And in this particular instance, in a city which is full of medieval street patterns and narrow roads, if we are to allocate more space to pedestrians and to cyclists and to public transport, which we must, then there have to be reductions in space allocated to cars. And there is no getting away from that fact. And that's a critical part of these low traffic neighbourhoods. It's a critical part of the Connecting Oxford proposals. It is not possible, to go back to the cakeism thing, to have the cake of low traffic neighbourhoods, to have the cake of better cycle lanes, better pavements, faster, more efficient bus services, and still have routes for cars where anybody can drive wherever they like. There needs to be a balance struck, and it needs to be a different balance from the one we have now, because we know the balance we have now is not effective, is driving pollution and congestion right the way across our city. So it's very much in favour of low traffic neighbourhoods, but as I hope we support this unanimously. Let's not forget that there's hard work to do to persuade people to come on board, and that some people will always be unreconciled to both the objectives and the means for getting there.
Thank you. The last speaker I'm going to take now is Councillor Hayes. If you could be brief, then should be able to get on to another motion.
I will do. Just to explain some of the amendments, there's an addition of a statement of thanks to Oxfordshire Livable Streets for all their hard work. I know that Councillor Wolf and yourself have been ahead of the curve, so have many other pairs of councillors, and it's in large thanks due to Oxfordshire Livable Streets. The other addition is to make plain that you can't force change on people. There ought to be consultation before significant change happens through LTNs. And that's because local people know their streets better than anyone else, particularly county councillors who represent very many people, whereas district councillors obviously represent fewer. It's also worth saying that there is a debate about LTNs nationwide. That's absolutely fine. Change will stir up debate, and in a democracy, as long as you exhibit compassion and reason, you can actually find a way through that. And I think we can all find a way through the debates in our own communities. It's also worth saying that there's an addition of change, there's an addition of a commitment to building an evidence base for change. People will be carried along on a journey for LTNs if they believe the evidence put before them, and we should all be building robust evidence. And I think, indeed, adding why the County Council lost out on the first tranche of funding, that wasn't done just to have a go, which is justified at the County Council. It's to point out that the County Council risk losing further funding in the future around tranche 2 if they continue not to consult the city. Moving beyond the clarification of why Oxford lost out on free money from the government to clarifying whether this council should be a funder, I can only echo what Ed has said and add to that we are not the Transport Authority. The Transport Authority is the County Council, and if the County Council loses money for the city, that is the County Council's fault. They ought to engage the City Council in order not to lose funding, but we can't take on their transport responsibilities as a City Council. What we can do, though, as political parties, is take on the transport responsibilities of the County Council by ousting the Tories in May. So, can I propose that we pass the motion as it's been amended and that we all commit to getting rid of the Tory County Council at the elections in May? Thank you.
Yes, although that's a very worthy aim, I'm not sure that's in the substantive text of the motion, where it might be implicit. So, Jennifer, can we move to vote on the motion? So just to remind people, we're voting for it.
Lord Mayor, Tom Landell-Mills does get a very brief opportunity to sum up. Can I warn people we've got 5 minutes of the allotted hour for motions left?
Yeah, so if you could be brief, Councillor Landell-Mills, you do have the right to sum up. I apologise for missing that out.
I'll be brief, but I welcome the fact that we can pull together as a city. I think that the consultation will be vital for making this work and winning over some of the naysayers and getting the detail that we need. I mean, in my sort of area, the Jericho and Walton Street one has crowdsourced an amazing amount of money, and that's done really well. And I think all these areas are going to actually, if they get it right and actually fine tune it and, you know, get the local, us city councillors get involved and work with it, we will end up with some good schemes. And we really can't leave it to the county council to do it. They just don't have the track record of delivering these things. But anyway, thank you very much. And I think this is a great motion.
If you can move to a vote now, thank you very much. That's summing up. Jennifer.
Can I see all of those in favour of the motion as amended, please? And I make it, we have 42 councillors and I have 42 blue hands showing. So that is all in agreement, that's carried.
So the next motion is 17E, and we have literally 3 minutes to do that. So Councillor Henwood, I suspect if you are to accept Councillor Linda Smith's amendment, then we can probably have a very brief debate on it. If you're not, I'm afraid we're probably not going to have the time. So over to you, Councillor Henwood. Do you accept the amendment from Councillor Linda Smith?
I accept the motion, amendment, sorry, Lord.
You do, sorry. Yeah, okay. Would you like to very, very briefly introduce, a couple of minutes to introduce your motion, then we can move straight to a vote.
It's been a very refreshing evening to see so many motions based upon our environment and a collective responsibility towards it. I really thank everybody for everybody's input and the speakers. My motion is about verges. Currently in Oxford, our teams cut the verges in the growing season once a month. So the proposal may have the impact of reducing the number of cuts per year, either biannually or annually. We've been working closely with ODS team Parks and Councillor Smith, who's offered some really useful input recently to a local project in Cowley. So yes, the motion is to start thinking about our verges, introducing more wildlife. We've noticed during lockdown the pleasant sound of crickets in Cowley for the first time for many, many years. And we believe that these corridors of biodiversity can only be a good thing that will both benefit our environment and ourselves. Thank you. I finished there.
Thank you for being extremely brief. And I propose, so Councillor Goddard, you down a seconding it? I'm saying just want to reserve, or do you want to speak or not? Just
yeah, amazingly briefly, my Lord Mayor. Councillor Henwood is quite right. One of the very few good things to come out of lockdown was that brief respite which was afforded to our natural environment. People will remember being able to cycle on almost empty roads when you could get out for your Boris bike session per day. They'll remember the fresh air, they'll remember the lack of vapour trails in the sky. And one of the good things about that was the way in which, almost by accident, the verges in our city and elsewhere were able to bloom. That's a good thing. When the flowers bloom, the insects feed off them, the birds feed off the insects, it's win-win. I think that the more we can do to encourage these mini nature reserves with all they do for our residents' well-being and mental health, the better. So I look forward to seeing the concrete proposals which Linda Smith has referred to in the budgeting process in due course. It would be great if you could do something about this.
Thank you very much. Let's move straight to a vote on this. Indeed, very lovely when we see nature bounce back. And Jennifer.
So could all of those in favour of the motion as amended, please raise their hands. Just bear with me a second. I have 39 hands showing in support. Sorry, 40 and 41. So I have 41 out of 41 councillors showing, unless I have missed anyone.
Thank you.
That is carried.
Thank you. That motion passes. Thank you very much. Now that's I think all the time we have for motions. I did promise Councillor Tidball some time to go back to 15 if she so wishes and if her technology is working. So Councillor Tidball, are you there?
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm with a little person. I think it might be best if members could send me written questions and I can respond over email, if that's okay.
Get some good answers as well. Okay. So just to remind people, we did have Councillor Gant, Councillor Wolf and Councillor Rowley were asking questions. If they could put that in writing to Councillor Tidball, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you very much, Councillor Tidball. Everyone stay safe, have a great evening, and thank you very much. Thank you,
Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.